That's better. That's better. All right. Welcome to another edition of Folks Talking Sports. Excuse me. Houston Roundball Review presents Folks Talking Sports. I'm the host, Kris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review. Joining me is my colleagues, my, mentees. Will, you kind of a mentee, yeah.
Kinda. I
So, yeah,
am.
no, Andy,
Okay.
Andy, you are, but
100%.
yeah, Will still learning about
Okay.
everything. So, yeah, I'm Kris Gardner, Houston Roundball Review. Joining me, Willy Gibson. And plug your website right now, Willy Gibson from Ohio, the state of Ohio.
Oh, WTGsports.com.
WTGsports.com. And also Andy Yanez from Paul Slamma Jamma, the community impact newspaper, and any other thing. How are you all doing? Y'all good?
I'm doing great. We got a stacked show.
Good.
I can't wait.
Yeah, we got a stack show, so let's get right into it. This first segment, we're going to talk, wrap up the NBA Finals, Bucks claiming the championship, and then 7:20 got a guest, our first of hopefully three guests joining us to get into U of H stuff, the impact of the Longhorns, Oklahoma's move, I guess soon to be announced move officially going to the SEC and how that impacts the teams in the Little 12 and the American Athletic Conference.
Little 12.
But right now, let's talk about the Bucks. And for Rocket fans tuning in just a few moments, I'm going to play a few comments from Cade Cunningham talking about the Rockets as well as the Detroit Pistons, the teams who have the top two picks in the upcoming 2021 NBA draft, which will take place Thursday, July 29th. So I'm looking forward to that. Second hour, after our third guest hopefully talks to us, we're going to dive into USA basketball on the fella side. But right now, Bucks 1-6. They won 4 in a row. Defeated the Suns. Yanez, Finals MVP, dropped a 50-piece in Game 6. What are your thoughts on the Bucks win the championship?
I've never seen a coach go from the precipice of being fired to winning the championship by Mike Budenholzer ass. I mean, the Bucks did. I mean, they made him look good. I mean, Yanez did what Yanez does. I mean, somebody told me that, well, Middleton was the guy. Yanez disappeared in stretches of that series. I mean, no, he didn't. Yanez averaged 30 and 14. He didn't disappear during that series. Chris Middleton in key stretches towards the end of games. And that goes to the whole Batman, Robin, who's the closer. Chris Middleton's is actually the specified closer for that team. But Yanez, by no stretch of the imagination, disappeared. He's the unquestioned leader of that team. And he showed that in Game 6. I mean, he struggled from the free throw line all season and 56% throughout the playoffs and shot 17 for 19 in a closeout game. I mean, if that's not a leader, if that's not your best player, I don't know what is. So, I mean, congrats. I mean, Drew Holiday, did what Drew Holiday does. He did what they brought him there to do. And,
But what is that, Will? What did Drew do?
What did Drew? He made plays. He struggled. His shot, I think he was 3 for 16. And that closeout game.
Make shots, yeah.
Yeah, he struggled, no question. His shot was off in Game 6. But he brought a common effect. He played defense. The reason why he was brought there to Team USA, which I know we'll get to in later segments, but he played defense. His overall game is exactly what Milwaukee needed. Clearly, Eric Bledsoe in previous years wasn't the answer. He brought a common effect, and he did what he was brought there to do, and they won the championship. Along with PJ Tucker and other pieces as well. But I mean, kudos to the Bucks.
Andy, what are your thoughts on the Bucks win the championship?
Yeah, Will said it perfectly in terms of the Giannis talk. I mean, he was clearly the best player in the entire series. He had 2 40-point games. He closed it out with the monster 50-piece. And this is going to be a little bit of my hot take, but I don't think Giannis not only solidified his role with the Bucks, I think he, with his performance right now, and I'm talking right now after the NBA Finals, I feel like he is the best player in the NBA behind no one. I think KD is 2. Maybe after that you could put LeBron. I'm not sure about that.
No, we're going to talk about that then. Yeah, this is going to be a discussion.
I
Definitely
got
gotta talk
Giannis
about
number
that.
one. He is the best player in the NBA today, in my opinion. With that performance, I don't think you can argue. Not only the stats, but I mean the key plays in the series. Coming off an injury where honestly we had no idea if he was going to play. He was a game time decision until the very end and before game one. The performance he put in that game one, it wasn't eye-popping, but considering he wasn't supposed to play that game, it was phenomenal. He only grew from there. He had the block on DeAndre Ayton, the alley-oop, I believe it was in game 5 that sealed that deal. I think Yanez is the best player in the NBA right now.
He's not complete, which is scary because he still does. He's
26.
power. He maximizes what he does well. He's not a great outside shooter. He's not a great low post scorer. He's not a great mid post scorer. You know, he does have weaknesses in his game, but for what he does, he is the best at what he does. He's not a complete player yet. That's not taken away from him. He's just not complete. Now, if he adds a consistent jumper, and if he adds a consistent 3-point shot, then what are you going to do? You know, teams back up off of him now because they would rather him take their chances with him shooting jumpers. So if he adds that to his game, you know, the comparison, I think it was 3-4 years ago, Shaq himself said, Giannis is today's Shaq. He is that dominant, you know. But the thing with Shaq was, Shaq never added to his game. Shaq he was the biggest dude on the floor. He got the ball down low. He was at that 330 pounds and back and dunk on folks. Giannis is still young enough so he can add a consistent jumper, add a consistent jump hook. Boy, if he knocks down, if he becomes the 35+% 3-point shooter,
man, how do you defend him?
You know, yeah. What do you do? You just say, okay, we're gonna let Yanez get his 35, and then hope everybody else just blow their average. You know, that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, but KD is a more complete offensive player. I think LeBron's reign of being the best overall player is coming to an end. But offensively and defensively, he's the most complete player in the league still. Now, you can quibble about semantics, you know, that's fine. But I'm not going to take anything away from Giannis carried the Bucks for most of that game until the other teammates stepped up. And don't forget about Bobby Portis. Bobby Portis stepped up huge for the Bucks. He was the reliable scorer for the first half, along with Yanez. Chris Middleton was struggling. Drew was struggling. Bobby Portis kept them around. Him and Yanez kept them in that game. So, as I've said, teams win, teams lose. Will the Bucks? Okay, if you're Bobby Portis, it's aging. No, forget that. If you're Bobby Portis, will you take more money from a team that may not have a championship caliber team, or take less money to stay with the Bucks and have a chance at repeating? Andy, you first.
This is a decision that Bobby Portis has to make. He has his ring. If he wants to go chase the bag, he should go chase the bag and get paid. But if he feels like what the Milwaukee Bucks have established, the culture, the standard that they've set, and he wants to run it back, get another ring, then he'll stay. I think it's a personal decision for him. If I was in his shoes, and this is gonna sound so, you already have your ring, go chase the bag, go get paid somewhere. Now, it's honestly going to be on what he deems is more. What's the bigger deal for him? If he wants to get more rings, compete at a high level, I feel like the Bucks, at least for the next 2-3 years, are going to be at that high level where they'll have their championship window still open. He can stay with Milwaukee, but if he wants to get paid, he needs to go elsewhere.
Will?
Secure the bag, because what everyone's telling me is that Brooklyn is the team to beat in the East. And if Kyrie and Harden are healthy, then Milwaukee, we're not even talking about Milwaukee. So if you bring back a healthy Harden, a healthy Kyrie, along with KD, then people tell me that's the team to beat. So if I'm Bobby Portis, you got to secure the bag. You got the ring. Yeah, it's great to win, but if you haven't won, then perhaps you take less to stay with a contender. But you won, depending on how close the offers are. But yeah, if it's about the money, yeah, you gotta go secure the bag. Kris?
Okay. And let's, and I'll put it out there. What if Bobby Portis becomes this generation's Robert Horry? He chases the rings from other teams. Bobby goes to teams that have legit chances to win the ring, like Brooklyn, and maybe he's the missing piece there, and maybe Bobby gets rings. well,
that's KD.
But KD, okay, well, but KD's a better player than Robert Horry.
I don't know.
Bobby Portis is similar type of player that Robert Horry was. So, but what if he goes that route? I would hate on him if Bobby decided to chase the bag, get that money. But is one ring just enough? Sure. Is one ring enough? What if he wants more? But he could get that ring. What if he goes to the Lakers for the mid-level, if that's possible? What if he does that?
Yeah.
He's not chasing the bag. He's chasing a ring. That's somewhere else. Yes. Thoughts? No.
I think we just lost Will. Yeah. Like I mentioned, it has to be on his decision if he feels like he wants to go, not necessarily ring chase, but just compete at a high level for a championship year in and year out. He's probably gonna have to sacrifice the big payday, which, I mean, from a team, if you look at it from a standpoint, he'll probably get offered, I wouldn't necessarily say a max level contract, but a high end deal. I mean, he could get offered from teams like Orlando, teams like that are
Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland.
There they go. See?
Those level teams where they're not going to do anything in the next couple of years, they could offer him a 3-4 year contract where, once they get past 2 seasons, his contract becomes more attractive and they could ship him out to a contender. If he wants a bag, that's probably the route he has to take, but that's up to him. He has to decide what's more important to him.
Okay, before we get to our James Mueller guest James Mueller at 7:20, going to play about a 2-minute clip of comments from Cade, soon to be Detroit Piston Cade. But anyway, this is from Cade answering questions from 2 local Houston area media journalists. First one's questions from Brian Bearfield, followed by Jonathan Fagan from Houston Chronicle. Here we go, Cade Cunningham.
From Brian Bearfield.
Thank you for your time, Kay. I appreciate it. Does the youth and athleticism of the Rockets intrigue you?
Definitely. I feel like, having young pieces that, you can build with and build on is important. And, Houston is a team that has a lot of things that they're trying to get back to. And so, I'm excited to see where they're going with it. Kevin Porter, started getting things going and he's looking like he's on track to have a great career. They got Christian Wood and just some more guys that, are ready to start getting comfortable in the NBA. So definitely an intriguing spot for sure.
And do you feel any pressure on being a top 5 pick?
One question.
Nah, I don't feel any pressure with it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's basketball. It's something I've been doing for a long time. So if I feel pressure about being, a big-time player or a good player, then there's no point in me, working hard to get to that. So I feel like that's to take pressure off is, working hard and preparing yourself.
Next question from Jonathan Fagan.
Thanks for doing this, Cade. At this stage of the process, how do you feel about potentially meeting with either the Rockets or any other teams that have high draft picks? Or do you feel like it's pretty much Detroit and you're just ready to get on with that?
I wanted to meet with the team that had the number 1 pick because I feel like I'm the number 1 pick. So I met with Detroit. They're the ones that have the pick. If the Rockets go get the number 1 pick, then, maybe I'll meet with them if there's enough time. But, that's the way that we went into it. I feel like I prepared myself to be in this position. So, I'm gonna stick with it. And, I'm happy to see where I go.
All right. Thoughts on what he said right there? Any disagreements, approvals, thumbs up, thumbs down? What in the world, Cade? What?
I mean, you can't fault him for anything he said. He's got that confidence. He feels like he's going to be the number 1 pick. He's going to be a Detroit Piston by the end of July 29th. Kris, I can see you smiling.
Oh man, I'm hyped, man. Y'all just don't know. I am so hyped. But yeah, another report came out today that the Rockets are set on the number 2 pick because the Pistons trade demands are too high, as they should be. As I told y'all, what I was asking for, the wish list was, and if the Rockets want to match that offer, stay number 2. And go ahead and grab Jalen Green. Jalen Green, to his credit, only worked out for 2 teams, Detroit and Houston, top 2 teams in the draft. So it's no different. And according to Draft Express, Jonathan Givony, he said that Evan Mobley did not work out for the Rockets at number 3. I mean, at number 2. He did not work out for the Rockets. So, agents, and it's agents, not really the players, agents dictate where they want their clients to go. So, Mobley and these people said we're not going to work for the Rockets. Will, you and your Cavs, and give Jared Allen all set to give him a new contract. They gave the right of refusal kind of thing for restricted free agency. So you're looking at Jared Allen and Evan Mobley future go forward. Are you good with that?
Yeah, they are looking at it. Actually, am I good with it? Absolutely. Evan Mobley is the young prototype big. You pair him with a Jared Allen. Cleveland's desperately lacked size the last few years. Kevin Love playing at the 5. Just it's not working, clearly, and they finally realized that. They're also looking to jump back into the top 10. Looking at trade offers, I know Golden State at 7 is looking to get off that pick from reports. Orlando at 5 and 8 possibly could be a trade partner for Cleveland to get back in, and Jonathan Kuminga, teammate of Jalen Green with the Ignite team, is a target. Reports are his workout in Cleveland was lights out. He impressed from pillar to post. Everything that he did while he was in Cleveland on off the court, totally impressed the staff, Kobe Altman, Mike Gansey, and that staff in Cleveland. So he's the target if they are able to jump back into the top 10. But at 3, it's definitely Evan Mobley.
Andy, what do you say about? Are you good with the Rockets? Because I think you guys at Pulse Alabama had a recent podcast about discussing the draft and doing mock choices. What did you stand in your mock picks?
Yeah, that episode actually released yesterday on Saturday. We did a merger episode with the Launchpad podcast, another one of our podcasts at Apollo Media. And like you mentioned, talking about the NBA draft, and that subject did come up. If we were in Raphael Stone's shoes, would we trade for the number 1 pick? And I was on the side, just keep your assets. Especially with what the asking price is for Detroit. And you mentioned Kris Gardner. Kris, he said that the minimum should be all 3 first-round picks this year and then a future first next year, whether it's Detroit's own pick or your own. I think that the asking price is way too high for that, especially in this draft where, the other 3 candidates outside of Cade Cunningham are coming out. They're really high coming out of college or the G League, wherever they're coming from, especially when it comes to if you go with Jalen Green, you'll have a young backcourt with him and Kevin Porter Jr. You get a chance to grow that youth. If you keep your assets in the future, maybe you can have a package around those future capital picks from a disgruntled star and accelerate that process if that's whatever the Rockets choose to do. I think right now giving up those assets for Cade is too soon, in my opinion.
And with that, our first of 3 guests has joined us. He's in the green room. We're going to go to him now. And folks, we're going to talk football, college football for a good while. So just be patient. We'll get back to basketball 8 o'clock at some point, but we're going to start with college football and big news and impact. And the first guest is going to bring in James Mueller from the Daily Cougar, sports editor for the Daily Cougar. James, how you doing, man?
Good. How are y'all?
Doing great, man. All right, Mr. Sports Editor for the Daily Cougar. What were your thoughts? Because I think I sent you a link Friday or Saturday. I don't even know which one it was, but it's about the news about Longhorns and Sooners going to the SEC. And your comment was basically, yeah, I have thoughts on that, thoughts about that. So what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, my mind's been spinning a lot. First of all, I just think I mean, obviously, covering Houston, the University of Houston, there's a lot of impacts on if Oklahoma and Texas actually end up going to the SEC, which it looks like it's almost a foregone conclusion. So yeah, I mean, I think the Big 12 is in trouble just because those are your two big money makers right there. They have the biggest fan bases. They typically have the most success all around in sports. I know Texas hasn't been great in football or basketball recently, but they've dominated swimming and tennis and other sports. In OU, they've made the playoffs almost every year. So I think it's the Big 12 is in a tough situation. But the intriguing thing then with that, like in my job, is like, what's it mean for Houston, right? And if they would get pursued, I know there's been reports saying that some of the teams the Big 12 might be interested in if Texas and Oklahoma do leave are Houston, UCF, Cincinnati, BYU, teams like that. So I think it's a very intriguing prospect. And then I also think the second big idea it brings up is this idea of super conferences, right? The SEC, everyone knows, is the premier college football conference. They've dominated. An SEC team is always almost in the college football playoff championship. They're always in the playoffs. A lot of times an SEC is the champion. So it's the premier football conference. So if you see these two schools like Oklahoma, who's been one of the better football programs for the past decade or so, and then Texas, who has had their years and looks to be like they could be on the rise with Steve Sarkisian, it brings into question, then will other teams jump ship to other conferences? Will the ACC look to add someone? The Big Ten look to add some big time names. So I think there's a lot of different ways this can go. And yeah, there's just, I mean, it's a lot to think about.
And since the three of us are in Houston and Will is in Ohio in Big Ten country, Will, hold your water, because we're going to come to you to get the Big Ten perspective in just a second. But let's talk about from a U of H perspective and an AAC perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with the rationale that some have suggested that the teams in the AAC should stay put because the American is more stable, the future of the American is more stable than the Little 12?
It just depends. I think it looks like that right now. The American's probably more stable because with the Big 12, you have all these reports that Kansas and Iowa State have reached out to the Big 10, and West Virginia wants to join the ACC. So it looks like if Texas and Oklahoma do jump ship, it looks like all these other schools are going to as well. So in that sense, I'd say the American's more stable. But then there's also the alternative, right? If the remaining 8 Big 12 teams stay together, then if you're a Houston, a UCF, a Cincinnati like that, if you could get over to the Big 12, I think that would put you in a better position just because the quality of competition is a little improved, even without Texas and Oklahoma. If you could add some of those premier American conference teams, not only in football, but basketball and other sports as well. So, yeah.
Andy, what do you say? Because I got a retort to that. What do you say?
Yeah, I think we might be leaning towards the same direction. I don't know what your retort is, Kris, but I think the American Athletic Conference needs to kind of get into survival mode a little bit, start seeing how many schools they can reach out from the big, or like you're saying, the Little 12, because there's a lot of rumors going on right now. I mean, I've heard things from even the Pac-12 trying to absorb not only some of these Little 12 schools, but also teams from the American. I know U of H has been thrown out there. I'm not sure how viable that actually is. And like James mentioned with super conferences, if that happens, the American Athletic Conference is not going to exist in a few years, or however fast this timeline is. The whole process with this news has been really accelerated. But I think I mentioned this before, and you sent me another thing that might be in favor of the American Athletic Conference, which would be that if the OU and UT, the money that they get from the buyouts they have to pay, that would not be shared with any new schools that would join the Big 12. I think that's a big plus for, say the American Athletic Conference, which if any of those teams decides to jump ship and head over to the Big 12, wants to fill that void, they won't necessarily get any of those. Well, they'll get financial benefits, but not as big from the buyout of UT and OU. And like one thing they mentioned with the stability, that's something that the American Athletic Conference is going, and it's something we've kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say kind of pointed at the American Athletic Conference. They love calling themselves the Power Six. They better hurry up and act like a power conference school if they want to survive, in my opinion, because everything's so fragile, for lack of a better word, in terms of how everything's moving.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Andy. Well, Will, I mean, you're an out-of-towner. So what are your thoughts from outside looking in about what the Longhorns and Sooners are doing and the ramifications of college football, college athletics overall?
We talked about it with Bobby Portis. They're straight secure in the bag. I mean, this is not about competition. This is not about rivalries. This is not about. This is strictly about financial considerations. Period. I mean, the SEC. I think they get a report I saw $56 million per team as far as their revenue sharing portion. UT willing to give up the Longhorn Network in order to join the SEC. If that's not about a financial consideration, I don't know what is. That tells you right there, this is about money. Period. Oklahoma pretty much has its run. Every now and again, you have a Baylor step up that tries to challenge. But for most part, Oklahoma has its run of football in the Big 12. And they want to give that up to go battle head up against Alabama. It's money. Flat out.
It is. And the Oklahoma angle is, you brought up, that's the point right there. Why would they leave where they, especially if assuming the new 12-team proposal happens, OU would have just about year in, year out in the Big 12, a spot in the college playoff. Mm-hmm. Moving to the SEC, their chances lessen because you're competing against Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Auburn, Texas. Texas A&M. That's 7 teams right there. Now, I think we all agree that with the new playoff and 12 teams invited, the SEC is counting on 4 or 5 of their members going to be in that part of that 12. But even if it's 4 or 5, we named 8 teams from the SEC. That means 3 or 4 of them aren't going to be there in the playoff. So the money's going to be a lot, no doubt about that. I'm kind of surprised Oklahoma's doing this. The Big 12 is disappointed in Oklahoma and loyalty. All that went out the window years ago. Those folks being naive. But from a U of H perspective, from an AAC perspective, and Joseph Duarte should join us, and hopefully he's on vacation. He's agreed to join us from vacation in about 10, 11 minutes. He wrote an article about this, and I spoke to someone yesterday, another source, almost hand in hand with JD said that the American will be proactive and aggressive in reaching out to invite teams from the Big 12, Little 12, to join the American. Because as Andy mentioned, the buyout money from Longhorns and Sooners would go to the current members, the remaining members of the Little 12. That would not go to the new members. Okay, so that wouldn't go to Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, or whoever the Little 12 invited. That would just go to Baylor, Oklahoma State, K-State, Iowa State, etc. So, factor that in, you got the Big 12 TV contract comes up in 4 years. Without Texas and Oklahoma, they're not going to get big dollars from a network. So the money they get might be on par with what the American gets right now. But if the American, on the other hand, adds Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU, BYU, Boise State, whatever, better teams, and goes to ESPN and says, hey, we want to renegotiate our deal with y'all. Look at who we've added. Look at the content we've added to you. Let's work on an agreement that increases our payouts for our member schools. What about that angle?
I mean, I can speak just I agree with you and what you said about the American being aggressive and pursuing. I've heard from multiple people as well that they're gonna, obviously they'd rather have teams brought in than the conference disbanded. I think the only pushback to that I would say is I think a lot of these schools, if you're like a Baylor, a Kansas, an Oklahoma State, whatever, I don't think the American will be a lot of their first choices to go to. I think they're going to try to get into, whether it's the Big Ten, the ACC, the Pac-12. So I think that's the hard part is convincing them to come to the American because there are options out there that look better to them at the moment.
I agree with that, and I think some of them will be surprised when the phone call is when the phone is hung up in their face. So that's going to happen to some of these programs.
Yeah.
One of the we've heard being discussed main impetus for Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12 is they tried, February, March, to open up negotiations with ESPN, Fox for a new deal. And those TV contract networks told them, yeah, we're not interested in doing that right now. Or the money they suggested was less than what they're getting right now. So Texas was like, well, maybe we need to do something else. So that was like a further push for them to leave, to go to the SEC, to get more money, to be in the biggest or second biggest conference, in football in the country, because they know that's where the money is going to be. Mm-hmm. Money is not going to be in the remaining Big 12. So saying that, Will,
yes, sir.
KU supposedly reached out to the Big Ten. Only thing that the Big Ten, in my eyes, would want KU is because Kansas is an AAU, an American Association University, an AAU school. That's it. Mm-hmm. Football stinks. Okay, yep. Football makes the world go round in college sports.
Yep.
Do you think the Big Ten would say, "Come on, KU, yeah, come on, join us"? Do you think they will?
Let me see. No, they wouldn't. What I will tell you this, and I know you talked about the AAC.
Oh, we lost Will.
I wanted to.
Kevin.
Oh, come on.
I see it.
You broke up there. Try it again.
I guarantee Kevin Warren will be on the phone with the University of Cincinnati. It's a natural progression. Mm-hmm. Cincinnati will be invited to join the Big Ten, in my opinion.
And that makes sense. But is Cincinnati an AAU school?
That I would have to look into. That I'm not sure.
Because I asked that because for years, one of the reasons the Big Ten was who they were, wanted to, beat their chest, is because the members, if not all of them, majority of them, were members of the AAU. So, a few years ago, U of H president, what is the official title of Dr. Couture? Chancellor? What is it? What is it? Official title? What is she really? President? What is it? Guys, help me out here. What is
I think it's Chancellor.
Yeah. She wants to get the University of Houston to that AAU status. That tier 1 status and all those things. That's one of her goals. I mean, she stated that a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So if the Big Ten sticks with that, then I don't see them changing, money talks. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But why would Big Ten change that membership status just to get Cincinnati or just to get West Virginia or whoever to join the conference?
Yeah, real quickly looking that up, it does not look like Cincinnati's an AAU school.
Okay. So I think from a regional perspective, it makes sense. Football perspective, they're a top 10, top 15 program. Luke Fickell's doing great things. Ohio State wouldn't be scared. It'd be great rivalries, between them. Oh, look at that. He's on screen. So I don't know if he left vacation or found a hot spot or something. He's chimed in early. So let's go to him. We got a big time guest joining us now to add some insight to this discussion. Mr. Joseph Duarte from the Houston Chronicle. How you doing, man?
Good. How about you, Chris?
Doing great, man. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I couldn't pass it up when you got Andy James and Sam Kahn. So I had to get in on this.
JD, I read your article about the AAC being aggressive and pursuing teams. Just what are your thoughts? What can you add to that?
Well, Chris, this is sort of there's a lot of moving parts, and the first domino is Oklahoma and Texas making their intentions known to the Big 12 that they plan to leave. And once that happens, then you have, okay, what happens with the 8 remaining teams? And that's where things could get tricky because there's a lot of scenarios. You could have those 8 teams try to go find 2 to 4 teams and somehow have the Big 12 survive, which I think is probably the last thing that happens. You could have those 8 teams decide to break off. You've heard, possibly Oklahoma State, Texas Tech going out west to the Pac-12, Kansas, Iowa State possibly to the Big 10. You've got some mix. So, there's that scenario. And then there's the one that I think is kind of the funniest of them all. You look at the American is now in a position of strength. 5 years ago, they were going to get rated and possibly lose some of their biggest names. Now they could sort of be a home or a landing spot for, if not a few, possibly all 8 teams. I'm being told that they are not going to sit back. They are going to be very aggressive in this move. They feel like this is a good opportunity in terms of where the next wave of, these super conferences or whatever. I think ultimately, Chris, just the long answer short here, I think you're going to go down to 4 of the major kinds. It's going to be a power 4. And I don't know if the American will still have enough to get in. I know that they've requested a meeting in the last month or so with the other commissioners. So a lot of things are on the table, but the American certainly wants to go out and if they can pluck a Baylor or a TCU or Texas Tech and kind of add that regional feel with SMU and Houston, I think that would be their best case scenario and certainly would help them in the long run.
JD, I want to ask you what James brought up.
Mm-hmm.
What if you're Mike Carrasco? What would you say to him, to Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU, to want to join the American?
I would tell them, one, we offer stability, which right now they can't say that in the Big 12. And I'd also say, based on what the Big 12 is looking at, there's no two teams out there that are going to provide as much value as Texas and Oklahoma. I was even told by one industry source that they feel like the what those 2 schools bring to the table is about 70 cents on the dollar. So you're looking at the other 8 schools and what they would offer. You're not going to get a Notre Dame. You're not going to get somebody like a USC or somebody to move to your conference. So if you're Mike Oresco, you could tell them, look, come over to our league. The payout will eventually, I think, will be more than what they're going to be able to offer in the Big 12, because I think right now the Americans at about 12 or so, maybe pushing 15 in some spots. I think at some point the Big 12's payout is going to go from that nice 35, 30 range, and it's going to dip, once the negotiations happen again and they're back at the table for the TV money. So, if you're Mike Oresco, you have some things to offer, and there's worse spots. I mean, where else would they go? The Mountain West, the Sun Belt, Conference USA. The American has proven to be that group of 5 conference that's sort of the premier. They've had the New Year's Six Bowl, and now the college football players offers a spot. So, I mean, they're pretty much going to be able to get as much in the American as they would if they try to stay and keep the Big 12 alive.
James, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. If you look at the American, even though they're not technically, a power school or a power conference, they've had so much success. They've had a Final Four team in Houston this year. They had a Cincinnati football team that I thought should have gotten the 4th spot in the college football playoffs. Obviously, they didn't, but they went toe-to-toe with Georgia in their bowl game. They have a lot more to offer, and I agree with Joseph also that, if Texas and OU, that thing does become official and they announce their intentions to leave the conference, I think the last resort for the remaining 8 teams is to stay together, because they know, like Joseph just mentioned, no, the big dogs in the conference are gone, and it's just going to be a struggle, revenue wise, and just to get even media coverage and all that. So yeah, I 100% agree with what Joseph's saying, and think the American does have a pitch that could draw interest, because like we were saying before, not all these teams, the remaining 8 teams, would have a chance to get into the Big Ten or the ACC or whatever. There's some that will be denied from those other conferences.
Chris, keep in mind also that, if the American doesn't add one single Big 12 school, they could still go out. We've heard that they've wanted BYU in the past. They've wanted Boise State. They've wanted San Diego State and even Colorado State. So in that regard, you could still strengthen your conference and expand your footprint by adding any of those schools. The Big 12 could possibly go after Colorado, see if they want to come back to the conference. That hasn't been exactly the right fit, or maybe get a Utah. We've heard the Arizona schools possibly. So there's a lot of things. The Pac-12 hasn't indicated that they really want to do anything, but if you're the American, you have options. And right now, that's a lot more than you can say from what they had 5 years ago.
Andy, and this is for all 3 of you. If you're Commissioner Resco, I think the AAC has 11 football schools, right?
10.
10. Okay, 10. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So would you want to add 6 teams to go to 16? If yes to that, give me your wish list for 6.
I'd probably go Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU if you can get those from the Big 12, and then BYU, Boise State, and for wild card, try to get Oklahoma State in there. See if you can nab them.
James?
Mine would be similar. I think Baylor, Texas Tech, and TCU, if you can try to get more Texas teams in there to, create that sort of Texas bond, that could be a pitch. And then Oklahoma State, obviously, they're the best football school in the Big 12 remaining if Texas and OU leave, in my opinion. So I'd go after them. And then BYU, they have decent coverage. They have a fan base, so I think that's an option to pursue. And then probably you can shuffle around that 6th spot, but Boise State or San Diego State, those are the 2 that I would sort of consider for that 6th spot. Joseph, who are your 6?
Well, I mean, I don't know necessarily if they go to 16. I know that's the number when you look at the super conference model. I think 4 may be a little bit more realistic. I still think Texas Tech and Oklahoma State find their way into the Pac-12. That was going to almost happen a decade ago. I don't know anything specific. I just think that then now would be the time for the Pac-12 to come west, if that's what they're going to do. If this is all going to blow up and you're going to have these mega conferences, that's where you make your next push to get the state of Texas and the sort of the Midwest. So I would sort of try to grab a Baylor and a TCU, and then I would look at BYU and Boise. Those would be my 4. Now, if I had to go with the 16 team model, my other 2, I don't know if I would necessarily get both Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. I'd probably get Texas Tech, and then I would go with one of the other ones that I mentioned earlier, like a San Diego State or a Colorado State. But we've heard all kinds of stuff, Chris. Maybe the reincarnation of some type of Southwest Conference regional type deal. Do they go back and try to do that? But right now, this thing, I'm just amazed. This took so long last time just to have the guys lining up to interview to see who's going to go to the Big 12. We're talking about this stuff happening in the span of a week in terms of intentions known. And then I think that's when you're just going to see the dominoes fall after that.
We've got a question. It's for all of you. Does Texas Tech bring more to the Pac-12 than Houston? Joseph, you first.
No, because if you're looking for something new, what you don't have, they don't have the Houston market. Now, had Texas gone 10 years ago, yeah, everybody would say when Houston was up for the Big 12 that the Big 12 already had the Houston market because of Texas, and that was true. But in this case, they don't own the Houston market right now. So I think, yeah, you get that market. That's why I go with them. Now, if you go with sort of the name brand, somebody who's been in the power leagues. You look what Texas Tech has done in basketball and a little bit of their football history, then that's probably the fit. But I think if you're looking for eyeballs and you're looking to go into a new market, Houston is where you go. Now, a lot of Tech fans will tell you that they have a lot of alums and a lot of them live in the Houston area, but I still think, they don't have that market, and Houston would be the way I go if I'm the Pac-12.
Andy?
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you're talking recent success. I know the football team has kind of taken a bit of a downhill in the past few seasons, but look at basketball, what they were able to accomplish last season. And Joseph, I kind of have a question for you that's it's funny what I just said. But in terms of Houston, do you see them what from their perspective, do you see them staying put and letting play out what the American does, or do you see them being aggressive to join one of these other conferences, whether it's the Pac-12 or the Big Ten?
Well, yeah, you've been around campus, Andy. You sort of know there's the public spiel where they're like, we're happy, and the American, we're not looking to go anywhere. And then there's the behind the scenes where maybe it's not even behind the scenes. If you're Tillman Fertitta, he has basically said, we will be in a power conference one day. Now, he said that 5 years ago. It may happen, but it's not going to be anything close to what we thought it was going to look like 5 years ago. We thought it'd be the Big 12, and Texas and Oklahoma would be leading that, and it would be this mega conference. But, I think publicly you're still going to hear Houston say it's the American. I've talked to people that have said that all American ADs are on board. They're all united right now. They feel like this is an opportunity to sort of strengthen their hold, and perhaps they've done it on the field. Now perhaps in the pecking order, leapfrog the Big 12. But I think Houston's they should be looking out for themselves. They should be looking at options, and the SEC is not going to be an option. The Big Ten's not an option. The ACC is not an option. So your only option right now would be the Pac-12. So if something works out where they can squeeze themselves into a deal where, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Houston, something like that, I think you have to take it. But again, you look at what the Pac-12 has done. They haven't exactly been world beaters for all this, and they've certainly been behind the 8 ball when it comes to the college football playoff. So, I think all options are on the table in terms of the Pac-12 and the American, and maybe to some degree, but very lesser, the Big 12 for Houston.
James, does Houston offer more than Texas Tech for the Pac-12?
Yeah, I got to agree with what both Joseph and Andy said just because of the Houston market. And I think Joseph brought up a good point that, Texas Tech does have a lot of alums, especially in the Houston base. But with Houston, sort of what they've done under President Couture and how the school's grown and then their athletic success, especially in basketball, I think, they're sort of controlling their own city in the market. So I think Houston would offer more in terms of in the long run. But yeah, it just depends which way the Pac-12 wants to go. Do they want to go with a name brand that has been discussed before, or do they want to go with, a fresher face that has more potential in terms of marketability?
See, I'm curious with one more thing. And Kris, I was going to, for everyone, does this kind of make Dana Holgerson's seat for this upcoming season a lot more hotter? Because if UH football has another down year where I think Holgerson combined the past 2 seasons has won like 7 games total. If they have another bad year, does that put pressure on Renu Couture, Tillman Fertitta to make a move right now with how everything's kind of up in the air in terms of conferences to produce those wins?
It does in my mind, yes. But y'all can add to it.
Yeah, like we talked about last week, their schedule is very favorable. They should have 8 wins at a minimum, maybe 9. So, even if this wasn't happening, I think Holgerson's, he's got to win this year, just given how they've turned out the last few years, and also just how favorable their schedule is. We talked about how their non-conference matchups, they should win every single one except Texas Tech's a toss-up, but that's a very winnable game. And then in the conference, they're avoiding the big dogs like UCF and Cincinnati. So I think regardless of whether this goes on or not, with the conference realignment and stuff, I think the pressure's been on him since the 2020 season ended.
Joseph,
I'm going to borrow Dana's words from last week at the coaches convention. He said, "What did I do to you to deserve that question?" And he was joking because they asked him about the NIL, and he knew nothing about what was going on. But you're making $4 million, the pressure should be on you. And I think he's in a situation where year one, you're implementing new stuff. It's sort of a mulligan year. Everybody gets the year one to figure things out. Last year was the COVID year. They got hit just as hard as anybody in terms of cancellations and stuff. We're into year 3 of a 5-year deal. Yeah, there's no more outs. There's no more, excuses, if that's the word. So I do think that there's a pressure on him. And as James mentioned, the schedule sets up very favorably where, anything, in my opinion, below 8 wins would probably be a disappointment. And then, if they go 6-6, then they should seriously be considering making a change. But you got to remember 2 things. Houston has, for the most part, 1, never paid a coach this much before, and 2, in terms of what they would owe for a buyout, this isn't a school that's just given away money in the past. So, and then 3, who would you go out and get? So there's a lot of things that are, yes, riding on this season for Dana Holgorsen to be successful. I think everybody in the administration certainly wants him to be successful. But anything less than, remember what they said, we fire coaches for 8-4. That would sort of, I always thought that comment would come back and bite them one day. Yeah. And this could be the situation where you look at what they've done, and if he doesn't have a solid year, they may not have a choice.
Agreed. And let me go from a Pac-12 perspective, because for a few years, I've wondered why the Pac-12 thumbs its nose at Houston, the city of Houston, the markets, the need. They need, in my eyes, my opinion, they need to get TV markets eyeballs in the Midwest, in the middle of the country. Let me say that, center of the country. So yes, Houston's football is not as good as we think it should be. But now's the time, because pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, I heard from a couple of people that there were talks beginning or going to begin. It was in the pipeline about U of A going to the Pac-12. But Pac-12 folks and writers, oh, no, we don't want anything to do with Houston. Oh, no. I don't, but now the last day or two, we're hearing rumblings about the Pac-12 is considering options. What do you think is it perception of Houston? What is it?
Well, Chris, from a national standpoint, I'm not a native Houstonian, but I've been here 25 years now, so I sort of feel like I am now. And, from the national people that I talk to, yeah, that there is a perception, and, that it's, sort of this, more of a pro town for one, but even then it gets knocked a lot. I mean, I think just the feeling from, it's not a Chicago, it's not a New York City or an Atlanta or an LA, but to answer your part about the Pac-12, when the Big 12 talk was coming out in 2016, I remember getting hold of a bunch of emails and open record stuff, and Renew Couture and a bunch of the administration at Houston had informal conversations with the Pac-12. I remember Hunter Yurchek happened to be out west for a personal trip, and he jumped in and talked to Larry Scott, the commissioner at the time, and just to kind of gauge. It was a friendly conversation, but Houston sort of wanted to see where things were. So, I think maybe times have changed where maybe from a Pac-12 perspective, they would feel like, maybe moving into Texas isn't such a bad thing. Now, obviously, if they had their choice, they'd want the Longhorns over Houston. But since that's off the table, if you're going to survive in this, this conference realignment, you have to think outside the box. You have to go maybe places that you don't have, and certainly they don't have Texas. But I guess their point would be, how much does Houston add to it? Now, you would have Oregon and UCLA and all those schools coming into town every year. You'd have them playing at NRG probably quite a bit. So, what does that bring to the table, and is it worth, the headache or the work to get this way? And look at California, all those people that are moving from California to Texas. They're at Austin's kind of the new Silicon Valley of the Southwest. So a lot of things could play into this, Chris. I don't know why they frown upon the Houston market specifically, but if you're looking for the new the uncharted territory, they might consider coming to Houston.
Andy?
I mean, could it be? It's a hard question to answer just in terms of U of H. If you look at the football field, what they were able to do in those years in 2014, when it looked like they could have been. I always mix up these years. Joseph, you can correct me if it was 2015 or 2016, where it looked like they had a real shot at being in the college football playoff, like the way they started off.
Yeah.
2015, they knocked off.
No, actually 26. Well, both years to an extent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they knocked off Oklahoma. They knocked off Lamar Jackson's Cardinals.
That would have been in 2016.
Yeah. Like U of H has had success on the football field. I'm not entirely sure if it's something with the market. Maybe they're just not attracted to having teams this far out, but I'm not entirely sure.
James?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to what both these guys have said, like, I don't know exactly what it is about the Houston market, but when you're looking at this from a standpoint of, if we're going to have to add, Houston's the best option in Texas with UT gone. I'd take, like I said before, I'd take Houston over Texas Tech if I was the Pac-12. So I think if you are looking to add in Texas in the Pac-12, that might be something they really have to think about. Then, yeah, you gotta seriously consider Houston because of the market and just what they can bring to the table. Like we said, they have the potential to be a good football team. They haven't shown it recently, but they've shown it in previous years. And so, yeah, I mean, Houston's the way to go if you're really if they're looking to add a Texas presence.
And
Kris, Kris, you have to look at the elephant in the room, though. Houston hasn't been very good in football. I mean, they've been average, and other than that 2015 year, what have they really done since? Yeah, they have the Lamar Jackson win, they have the Oklahoma win, but they haven't even come close to winning their division, much less getting back to the college football playoff. And that matters for something because you can pick up any team anywhere, but if they're no good, nobody's going to watch. And what do you get out of that market? And is it worth paying another school another 25 or 30 million or whatever they're going to get? So, I mean, basketball wise, Houston would have been great. I'd love to see Houston, UCLA every year, or Houston, Oregon. And they played Oregon. You look at some of the schools that they played, Houston versus Arizona would be a great yearly matchup, but football drives this, and Houston hasn't done anything of substance outside of the Peach Bowl year, in the last, 20 years or so.
Sad but true. I mean, that is the problem, and that's what Dana needs to correct. And it would be, I don't say sad, because we're going to cover the school and teams regardless, but ironic if the door is shut in their face again because the football program has done its part of the deal, but that'll be the case. All right, James, you want to stick around with Sam? Well, I mean, Sam hasn't joined us yet, but let's talk. I got Cougar guys here. Some U of H basketball real quick. Oh, no. Duarte. You got kinfolk about to be drafted, right?
I sure do, man. Kris Duarte. He's the tallest Duarte, too. I can vouch for that.
How are y'all related?
Did I lose you?
No. Well, you tell us. How are you and Kris related?
We're not. I've adopted him.
Just a common name? I didn't think y'all were.
I've adopted the guy.
Okay, well.
And we got the same last name. He's about to be a first round. I'd be stupid not to claim him.
That's smart, man. That's smart.
Yeah.
But I got 3 Cougar guys here. I saw today, Quinn Grimes. We've seen mock drafts, Quinn Grimes going from maybe 23, I think Fagan had him at 23, to 37 to 40 range. Today, I saw on ESPN, had Quinn going 28 to the Sixers and Daryl Morey. What are you guys hearing about Quinn's draft status?
I think if you would have asked any of us, a month and a half ago, we all knew that he was probably coming out. I mean, that was going to be the last year. I probably would have saw him going in the Armani Brooks, Nate Hinton route with the undrafted, free agent signing. But what he did at the combine, the NBA combine, really opened some eyes. You heard a lot of people from various teams speak highly of him. I think he was the leading scorer at one point for most of his team's games, and his stock from that point on really shot up. So I think Fagan had him maybe 30 to the Jazz or somewhere around there this week. But from what I've heard from just gauging the pre-draft stuff going into the final week, I've seen him in that late 20s range, which to me would be great for him because this is a guy that he had a lot to still show even after a great year that he had at Houston this past year, and he went out and did it. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if he's a late first round pick.
All right, the biggest big dog of the night has joined us. Sam Khan is in the room. Let's bring him in from The Athletic. Sam Khan, how are you, sir?
What's up, guys? How are y'all?
Have you got any sleep last 2 days?
I have, but only because I cut myself off around midnight and just say, you know what, there's no more that can be done today, and get about 7 hours sleep and get up and start all over again. So it's been a busy day, but busy week, but just keep chugging along. So how are you guys?
Good.
We're doing good,
Sammy.
Sam. All right, man. What's your latest intel on what's going to happen with the Longhorns and Sooners?
So tomorrow they're supposed to send a letter to the Big 12 to let them know that they're not going to renew their grant of rights after expiration 2025. That'll be the first step they need to take in order to essentially declare themselves as free agents so they can officially engage with the SEC, and so the SEC can take a vote and decide whether or not to invite them, which it certainly seems that once Texas and Oklahoma are free, they will. And this actually tonight or earlier this afternoon, the Big 12 executive committee met with the presidents of Texas and Oklahoma virtually in, I think, a last-ditch effort to try to work something out to try to keep them. There's been some discussions about revenue sharing and whether they can redistribute some extra revenue shares to Texas and Oklahoma and reduce the other 8 members in hopes of keeping them. But this, so far from what I can tell, this all seems like a last-ditch effort to stop a train that's already far down the tracks.
Sam, when did you hear about this news? When did you first hear about it?
Wednesday, right before Jimbo Fisher got on the mic at SEC Media Days, I think when the Houston Chronicle reported it, and I was about as stunned as I think everybody else in the world was, because I was a week ago at Big 12 Media Days, and Bob Bowlesby said that realignment seemed to be a back burner item that was not something he was losing sleep over. But I guess we look back at now, maybe he should have been laying awake a little bit more at night.
Were you surprised?
Very. Yeah, I was stunned. I had no idea that this was coming. And talking to people over the last few days, it's become clear that this is something that has been in the works for a few months now, probably dating back at least to May when Big 12 first went to ESPN and Fox to discuss its television contract, which will be up in 2024. And when ESPN and Fox's response was tepid and they had no desire to renegotiate, it certainly seems like Oklahoma and Texas took that as a message to start looking around. But I was definitely stunned at it, and still am a little bit shocked that this is actually happening, because I don't think I would have ever pictured the two of the biggest brands in college football, two of the winningest programs in college football, joining what is considered to be the most powerful conference in college football. I certainly thought they were going to either stand alone in their own conference together in the Big 12, or if they were going to make a move, I thought it would have been to a different league, not to the SEC.
What does this do to the Big 12 teams, the leftover teams, in your opinion?
It's going to cripple them. There's only a few options. One option is they can try to stay together and attract some teams to expand and get back to double-digit membership and hope to survive in some way, shape, or form. But if they do that, they're going to take a massive hit in media rights revenue distribution. The Big 12 paid out in 2020 $37 million to each school for media rights. If Texas and OU exit the conference, even if you were to add a few teams from the American or BYU or Boise State, I would expect that they would probably get half that or less. I mean, you're talking a loss of maybe $15-20 million in media rights revenue every single year. So it'll cripple them that way. The other option is these teams could look to try to join another conference. The West Virginia's eye in the ACC. Some of these Big 12 teams are looking at the Pac-12. Kansas, of course, there was a report out that they are trying to reach out to the Big Ten. That is a potential option. Then that is probably the team's best chance of keeping media rights revenue in the same ballpark as it is now, is latching on to another power conference. But either way, the options are not good for the remaining 8 schools.
But Sam, if those leftover schools go elsewhere, wouldn't they have to give up grant of rights or pay money like that as well? So how's that going to work?
Absolutely. And that is probably what makes it hardest to leave, is they're going to have to give up. They're going to have to pay an exit fee just like Oklahoma and Texas will, unless they reach some kind of settlement. I guess if every team leaves, and the whole conference falls apart, I guess there's a potential for being able to get around something like that. But if they act individually, for instance, if West Virginia leaves to go to the ACC, certainly they're going to be on the hook for that money. And the teams that do stay in the conference are going to do everything they can to keep it, because they're going to need that money.
You guys got questions for Sam? Toss them out there.
Yes, Sam, I'm curious what you see from the American Athletic Conference with all of this. Do you see them being aggressive? Do you see them trying to absorb some of these remaining Big 12 teams?
They're certainly going to try. I think Mike Oresco definitely is going to be on the offensive. Now, whether or not they actually can attract some of these teams, I don't know how realistic that is. I would not rule out a merger between those two leagues. The one interesting factor in that is that I think it would be the American would be best served in merging and kind of folding into the Big 12 as opposed to the other way around, even though the Big 12 will have fewer teams. And the reason I say that is because the Big 12 has that Autonomy 5 designation from the NCAA, and that's something that even though if they go to 8 teams, they do not lose that. There is no criteria in the NCAA handbook that says you have to have this many teams or you have to have this configuration to have that A5 designation. It's simply there and listed as the 5 conferences: the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the Pac-10, and the SEC. So that is one of the saving graces for this league, is if they can keep that, which matters in Division I council voting, which matters in legislative affairs and NCAA governance, then you could potentially see the American maybe latch on to the Big 12 and create some kind of merger now. But I do think Oresco and the American Athletic are going to definitely be aggressive and try to do something to increase their value, whether it's adding these teams or pursuing some kind of joint merger with the Big 12.
Sam, you've been around Texas A&M quite a bit, and years ago they left the Big 12, they joined the SEC. That was their thing. They suddenly were the only team in Texas with the SEC. They could make that claim, recruiting, living rooms. What do you think is going on in their heads right now when they see the so-called Big Brother suddenly making a move into their territory, and now it's sort of like the shadow has followed them back, a decade later?
Yeah, they're definitely upset. They're definitely aggravated because, and I made this analogy yesterday, is they left the Big 12 to get away from Texas, and in large part to get out of a conference that Texas lorded a lot of power and influence. Texas threw its weight around. There's no secret about that. The league almost fell apart in 2010 when the Pac-16 flirtation happened, and the reason it held together was because Texas launched the Longhorn Network and got a massive third-tier rights deal that's way larger than anybody else's in the Big 12. And A&M left to get away from that. And now Texas is following them into the SEC. So they're upset because they have done well since going to the SEC. A&M has established a standalone identity. They have done well in recruiting. And I think in many ways in football, they've surpassed Texas. They've been more stable on the football field. They've won more games. They've won more conference games. They've had 2 top 5 finishes in the last 8 years. They flirted with a college football playoff. That's more than anything Texas has done on the field. Now, Texas's brand value and their long history and reputation certainly matters a lot, and this is why the SEC is willing to take them in. But as I said, this is like a divorce, and A&M divorced them, and now Texas is coming to move next door. And there's nothing that says that Texas can't move next door, but A&M sure as hell ain't got to like it. And they certainly don't at this point, but there's not really much they can do outside of simply going on the field and winning football games and continue to have success.
And Sam, Joseph, did you have one more?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I just had a question sort of on that recruiting. Like you pointed out, I saw the stat where, if you looked at Texas A&M's recruits from their last 10 years in the Big 12 versus their time in SEC, how much it's jumped and even passing Texas. How do you think that recruiting or affects the recruiting overall if this Texas and Oklahoma deal does go through and they eventually do join the SEC?
Yeah, it'll impact it. I don't know how significant it will be and how much we'll see it. I don't know if it will be as drastic as A&M's jump was, because one thing you have to factor in with A&M's jump is that they also benefited from very early success in the SEC. Yes, they moved to the SEC and that helped the recruiting, but it also helped that they went 20-6 in their first 2 years. Johnny Manziel won a Heisman Trophy. They were kind of the talk of the league when they first got in. I think ultimately it boils down to on-field success. Oklahoma's had plenty, so I think this will help Oklahoma. Texas hasn't had that much, and I think ultimately that's what matters the most is when Texas gets in, are they going to succeed? Is Steve Sarkisian going to help them get back to a conference championship contender? And if they do, then I think it evens it out a little bit. And that's the one thing that A&M has been able to sell to Texas prospects is like, hey, if you want to stay in the state of Texas and go play in the SEC, you come to us. Well, that card is no longer one you can play if Texas is in the SEC because now you have two options. So I don't think it'll cripple their recruiting, but certainly it will impact it, and it removes an edge that they've enjoyed for the last 8 years.
And that's one thing I wanted to expand on. Everybody knows the Texas brand is what drives things. Certainly they haven't done a lot on the field and a number of sports, but looking ahead a few years, people automatically assume just because Texas is going into the SEC that, well, they're Texas. How do you see that fitting from a competitive standpoint? And I'm also curious, what would that do for the money per team in the SEC? I mean, they're going to be printing money at that point. And each school, I mean, we could be looking at over close to maybe $60 million a school, or something north of at least 50, I would imagine.
Yeah. As far as the on-field product, I think a lot of it's going to depend on where they're placed in the league. And I would imagine that we're not going to have 8-team divisions, that we're going to probably have some type of pod set up of 4 teams apiece. I would be interested to see what pod are they put in. Is Texas put in with OU and A&M? And then who's the 4th team? That is going to determine in some ways how they perform on the field. Also, it goes back to Sark. Is he going to – Texas has recruited at a high level throughout this last decade, but what they haven't done is develop players. So is he going to develop players at the highest level? Are they going to be able to get draft picks in the league consistently? So I think – and the recruiting helps that. If they're able to get better players, then perhaps they are able to do a little bit better on the back end. But to your point on the revenue, it's going to skyrocket. So right now, the SEC in 2020 paid out $45.5 million. I told you 37 for the Big 12 last year. That's with a first-tier rights deal with CBS that only pays the conference $55 million a year. In 2024, when ESPN takes the first-tier rights, that $55 million is going to go up to $300 million a year. So you do the math and spread that around to those 14 schools. I think you're looking at 60, 70, maybe even $80 million a year per institution distributed media rights. And the way I've put it is I think the SEC at some point, once OU and Texas come in and they renegotiate that deal, every school is going to get the equivalent of a pretty solid Power 5 athletic budget each year. Texas Tech's athletic budget is in the 80s, I think high 80s, mid 80s. Iowa State's, I think, in the same ballpark. And SEC may be approaching that much every single year just in media rights. That's not including all the other revenue you get from tickets and games and all the other stuff. So that's a massive, massive amount of money. And I think it's going to stack the deck in the SEC's favor so much that I think it's going to have an impact on the sport that we may not all be ready for. And I do actually fear what this move means for the sport long term, just because of the impact it's going to have on competition. And essentially, I feel like it's going to eliminate competition. Right. And there's going to draw a permanent line between those Power 4 conferences or even the SEC and the rest of the country, and it will create a permanent underclass from those power conferences and the rest of the schools in college football.
I could see an Arkansas, A&M, Oklahoma, Texas pod, or something with LSU, and I'm not convinced even that Texas can win in that pod the way that they're going. I mean, money's driving this, getting away from the Big 12 and getting it. I mean, we all know Texas lives in the penthouse, and they want to be in that building. They don't feel like they're there right now, and they sort of rule over the league. But if they go to the SEC, they're third or fourth in terms of just the magnitude. You know, there's the Alabamas or the LSUs and certainly the Oklahomas. So, you know, they're going from being the team in the Big 12 to just, you know, one of the bunch, although they do have that brand still.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is that they're one of the two tent poles in the Big 12, and now they're going into a league where they're not one of those. They're one of, there's Alabama, there's Georgia, there's LSU. There's a lot of big brands in that league.
Sam, how soon will Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC and compete?
That's going to be interesting to watch. So they have indicated that they are willing to wait through the rest of the contract in 2025. I can't imagine that they're going to be 4-year lame ducks in that conference. That result isn't good for anybody. It's not going to be enjoyable for the Big 12. It's not going to be enjoyable for Texas and Oklahoma. I think you will eventually see, once the moves are made and everything is complete, I think you'll see Texas and Oklahoma work to reach some kind of settlement with the Big 12 and try to get out. I would imagine after the 2022 season. I can't imagine more than 2 years of 2 seasons of being a lame duck. I would expect if this move is made by 2023, which also happens to be the first year that the new 12-team playoff could possibly take effect, I think you could see it coincide with 2023. But that is something that we'll have to watch here in the coming weeks and months.
And Sam, you brought up a great point about the Big 12 still being autonomy, an autonomous conference for everybody. With that said, could you see Mike Aresco with that caveat, because the Big 12 will be an autonomous conference, folding in the AAC teams under the Big 12 umbrella to maintain autonomy status?
That's the question, I think, for Mike is he willing to do that? And I think, like I said, I think there's a benefit to it. And now we know their offices are now not very far from the Big 12 offices. The American is now located in Dallas, just like the Big 12 is. So I think it's a move that makes a lot of sense if you can make it happen. And I think if you bring in a lot of those American athletic schools, yes, the revenue is going to go down from what it was with the old Big 12 setup with Texas and OU, but those American athletic conferences will see an increase and possibly could be doubling their annual media rights revenue intake every year, which I think would be good for those schools. And there's one thing that I will say, and I think there's an interesting case to be made for what I would call a Southwest Conference light, where you have Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, Houston, and SMU all playing together again. Mm-hmm. If you can't have the elite revenue with everybody else, then why not make it enjoyable for your fans and have something that's interesting with some local rivalries that are fun, that are drivable, and bring some old familiar teams that you're used to that, you know, maybe not the kids today, but, you know, people our age grew up watching. You know, I grew up watching Southwest Conference football. I know it's not the old conference with Texas and Texas A&M in it, but it is a decent alternative, I think, to the other options they have, which for Texas Tech, Baylor, and TCU is maybe going to the Pac-12. I would think staying in a league with the current Big 12 with the Autonomous 5 designation and being able to track some of those other schools in, I think it would still be a competitive league. I think it'd still be a good basketball league. I think it'd be a great basketball league, actually. And I think there's a lot of appeal to it. But again, those are decisions that those schools have to make here in the coming weeks.
Joseph, what do you think about that?
Well, Kris, from the AAC side, you know, I'll look at it this way, and we all know the American and Mike Aresco have been publicly have said publicly that, I mean, they dislike the whole, you know, P5. I mean, they've gone out of their way to make it a P6. They don't like anything about that. They feel like it was sort of a forced deal where they had no say ever, and they were relegated to the little kids table. If I'm them and just thinking how they would, I don't know if they would want to merge like that. And I don't know what the rule would state in terms of if there could be a go back to the table. And if you're the American, you leapfrog the Big 12, or the Big 12 loses its A5 status. I don't know how that would work. I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know the contract language, but if you're the American, why wouldn't you maybe try to strengthen your end, not join them, and then make your case for inclusion and take a chance that way. I don't know the legality part of it, but that's the way I would go based on knowing their history, especially if they're going to join a Big 12 that loses its two headliners. I mean, there's not, Baylor's great. I think Texas Tech or TCU, those schools, even Oklahoma State, those would benefit the American, but I think it would be a reversal for them where they'd want those schools to fold into their conference versus, hey, let's take our 10 and 11 schools and go into a conference that now we're going to go save. We're sort of their lifeboat. And I don't know if that's something they'd want to do.
James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what Joseph brought up is a great point. I think obviously it makes sense for the American if they can get together with the Big 12. I think it would benefit them. But then you go to the legality issues of, is it the Big 16 or whatever, or do they take the American name and all that? Ultimately, though, I think like this comes down to if this merge would even be possible is if schools like West Virginia and Kansas, who have been reported to have had discussions with different teams joining, do they value, joining the Big 10 or the ACC more than merging with a conference like the American? So it comes down to those schools, because it eventually, if the Big 12, all these schools just falter off and you're only left with 3 or 4, it doesn't make much sense, for the American to go into the Big 12, in my opinion.
Andy?
Yeah, you guys have all hit it right in the nail when in terms of right now. From what I've seen with the American, I feel like they'd be too stubborn, at least for the next couple of seasons, to just fold. I wouldn't even say fold, but just merge a part of the Big 12. I feel like they'd be stubborn enough to try to get themselves into that P5 conversation. Not only that, but I think right now it's too chaotic, and just in terms of you don't even know what potential realignment looks like for other conferences right now. What if Cincinnati decides to go elsewhere? What if Houston decides to go elsewhere? There's too much unknown right now for me to see the American making a move like that.
Joseph, this is for you. And Sam, chime in if you have an answer to this. Have you heard, Joseph, a timetable for when Mike Oresco will, I guess, for lack of a better term, invite schools to join the conference?
No, I haven't heard anything that definitive. Right now, things have to take its course, and that begins, like Sam said, with Texas and OU making their intentions known, and then I think at that point, then you'll see more things start to fall in place. You'll have some dominoes go. But from the people that I spoke to this weekend, they insisted that the American would, like we talked about, would be aggressive, would sort of be proactive this time around. They weren't certainly going to sit back and just let things develop and not have a say in it. They want, if they want a school, yeah, they want to make that intention known. They put expansion on the back burner the last few years, and certainly after UConn left, they sort of took a let's see where this goes. And we've heard all the schools like Boise and BYU, but I would think that in the next couple of months, once this thing goes into motion, that's generally how things work, where you'll see, you won't see announcements, I don't think, but you'll at least start seeing leaks and word getting out about schools that are possibly on that radar or on a short list of starting to switch conferences.
Sam, have you heard anything about a timetable for Mike Oresco?
No, not as of yet. I think they're just going to look at the landscape and see what they can do. I get the sense that they're like Joseph said, they're going to try to be an aggressor. And one thing I would keep in mind about this too is when these talks happen, with the realignment discussion happens, I know the American is a popular conference that people look to possibly pluck teams. I would look to a lot of the teams in the league to probably stand pat, because they are probably in a more stable situation right now than certainly the Big 12 is. And I think if you look at a team like Houston or SMU, certainly they would like to get into the Big 12 if the Big 12 stays together. But aside from that, I would imagine they're going to kind of sit back, let the dust settle, and like Joseph said, if they can, maybe pull some of those teams in from the Big 12 into their league if possible. Again, I don't know how likely it is, but I think that's what they'll try. But aside from that, I can't imagine a ton of major movement from them in the interim. I think they're going to kind of wait and see what the landscape looks like and use their plan of attack from there.
Kris, you also have to look into what's going to be available. For instance, I've heard some crazy scenarios. One, the ACC would make sense for UCF, but Florida State will never allow it. Miami would probably never allow it. Then you look at how far of eastward would the Pac-12 go? You can't have Oregon and UCF in the same conference and call it the Pac-12, and they'll just be logistically a nightmare. So that's why UCF has always been mentioned as a possibility. If they left, it would be the Big 12. But again, there's so many different things that can happen. But then there's some things that I think are sort of off the table. Like the ACC and UCF. So what's left? And so, like Sam said, I think that the big players in the American, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, and Memphis, feel like this is a spot for them right now. Will it stay like that? This thing, we didn't think this was going to happen, so can't say for sure. But for now, it's a lot better situation than if you're those other 8 schools in the Big 12 right now.
Will the teams remaining in the Big 12 be able to exclude Houston from joining? Will TCU be able to keep SMU out from joining?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I don't know if it's say whether they can, but I think they will attempt. Based on history, I would think they would attempt to keep them out, if at all possible. Because, again, we go back to the same reason why A&M doesn't want Texas in the SEC. It's a recruiting advantage. And if you put them on par, if you put Houston and SMU in a league with Texas Tech, Baylor, and TCU, then you're even the amount of recruiting, because the one thing those 3 schools can sell above those other 2 schools is they were in a power conference and they had easier access to a title. Now, in a 12-team playoff world, that calculus started to change a little bit. In a 12-team playoff world, SMU or Houston may have as good a shot at getting the playoffs as Texas Tech did. So that's going to be an interesting part of it too, is how fast we get to a 12-team playoff and how the configuration winds up. Is it still going to be the highest 6 ranked conference champions based on this latest realignment? That I think that remains to be seen. But I definitely think just based on history that it would be Baylor and Texas Tech and TCU are going to feel it's in their best interest to not add any more Texas schools.
And Chris, if that's the thinking, that would be absolutely dumb of TCU or Texas Tech, because right now Houston doesn't need them. They need if this dissolves, they need the American, or they need another conference. So, okay, if you're not gonna want to be in the Big 12 with Houston because of recruiting, what happens when you have to go to the American and you're in there with Houston? You're going to be recruiting the same area. You're not going to have a better say over Houston in terms of what conference you're in. Now, if you go out to the Pac-12, that's a different story when you're selling recruits in terms of the autonomous 5 and stuff. But right now, that whole thinking, and for the younger guys here who don't remember how acrimonious and stuff that whole breakup was in Southwest, it was ugly. I mean, it was bitter, and Baylor wouldn't have got in if certain political figures weren't in place. And that's been the talk all these years. But that needs to be out the door. Texas and A&M can have their little Hatfields and McCoys and squabble because they are who they are. But when it comes down to it, some of those other schools were going to get left out. So, whether it's 30 years later or whatever, times have changed. And right now, whether Houston goes to the Big 12 or stays put, they are in a better place right now because their conference isn't on the verge right now of exploding. Big 12 could explode and dissolve it and completely go away. So, that's the way I would look at it, where Houston certainly is in a much better position right now.
Sam,
except for a couple of $100 million.
Sam Kahn from The Athletic. Man, when I talked to you and asked you to join, I said 10 to 20 minutes. Man, we're going on 30. You want to hang around some more? You got a boat?
Yeah, I got to hang around for one more question. I can hear my 10-month-old crying, so I'll have to grab in a minute. But okay. I'll tell you this. I'll add on to what Joseph said, and this goes back to what I said earlier. I agree with him that it would be short-sighted to keep those teams out. Again, I go back to the old Southwest Conference Light idea. I think it'd be a lot of fun to have those 5 teams together. Think about the idea of Texas Tech and Houston. I mean, we've seen Texas Tech and Houston play a lot in recent years on the football field, and it's always been fun. Baylor and SMU, I think, would be a lot of fun. And we've seen them play in non-conference at times also. I think it would be really beneficial. And SMU particularly is on the rise right now. They're a program that is doing really, really well under Sonny Dykes. They're recruiting at a high level. Their success right now reminds me a little bit of what Houston did in the mid 2010s under Tom Herman when they had the H-Town takeover going on, and they're recruiting Dallas in that same way. And I think they could be a real asset to a reconfigured Big 12 if the Big 12 decides to stay intact. So I think it would be a good move. And I'll leave it on this. I said it earlier and I referenced it. I'm a little uneasy about what this entire move means for the future of college football. We get further and further away from what it was. We talked about the Southwest Conference and when conferences were more regional, and this seems to be so much of a money grab that I think we've gotten really far away from where we were in 1984 when the Supreme Court, had a decision and handed the television rights, contractual rights to the schools and the conferences. And it opened up a whole new world, and that's what led to the breakup of the Southwest Conference. It led to the creation of the Big 12, and now it's led to the demise of the Big 12. And ultimately, now we're going to have our first super conference. So I think it's something to keep in mind, and I don't know what it's going to look like in the next few years, but it's definitely going to be a new world, and it's going to be a different one that I think for us who grew up with it a certain way, it's going to be hard to wrap our minds around.
I just want Houston and Baylor to play football.
There you go.
That's one way to get them on the field.
That's right. Dana Holgerson still wants to play, apparently.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sam, man, thank you for joining us, and we'll try to get you on, I guess, next Sunday if things break.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Take care, man.
Sure.
You too.
All right. In case folks are wondering, Will Gibson, he's been having tech issues in and out, but I want to bring Will in from Ohio on this one and Joseph, Will's kind of there, but not there. Sam makes a great point. Where does this end? Super conference. I mean, there was some talk about, the ACC, Pac-12 kind of merging to form a conglomerate, 32-team conference kind of deal. Where does it end?
Well, the neighborhood either runs out of land or runs out of money. That's the way I look at it. I mean, where does you're right. Where does this end? Is there going to be enough of the pie to feed everyone? I would imagine, that plays into a factor because you look at the SEC, they're going to be worth every penny in terms of what they bring. I think what you run into, Kris, is, we've already had the whole landscape where a lot of the group of five coaches mentioned this at the coaches convention that, you have half of college football before the season even begins is eliminated. They have no shot. So if you just take that part of it, it's already out of whack and so out of the imbalance there. But in terms of the revenue, I think I'm afraid that you're going to start seeing programs that have to dissolve, that people quit playing football. Athletic departments make these cuts like we saw during COVID. So, I mean, this thing could really, for all the greatness that's going to come from super conferences and fans are happy, I think you're going to see the bad side of it as well. And how bad, that's just going to have to see, what's left when everybody goes their way and who gets left out and who's able to survive all this.
Joseph, Andy, and James, for each of you, do you envision a possibility at some point in the future of the money being too much or Houston just going to basketball only conference kind of situation?
I can't see that. Just in terms of, I remember I think it might have been last year when we did like a budget overview of just UH athletics as a whole, just how much that the university has invested into their football program. Man, that something catastrophic has to happen if that were ever the case, in my opinion, with the University of Houston just abandoning football.
James?
I'm sort of similar to Andy. I think that it would have to spiral out of control where it really is like the SEC or maybe one or two conferences are really the only ones who people care about watching football-wise because they're just so far above and beyond everyone else. And just, I mean, Texas in general, the state, football is equivalent to religion here, and especially in Houston, huge football hub, produces the most NFL players statistically as of 2020, and there's more coming in. So I don't see them, going away from something that's been the bread and butter for so long.
Joseph?
Kris, you broke out on the question. Can you repeat what you were asking, just so I know I'm answering correctly?
Sure. Do you ever envision a scenario in the future of where U of H, they just can't afford football anymore and have to go to basketball only conference?
Never. Like these guys said, football in a perfect world, football and basketball are your revenue generators. Those are the two big ones. But there's, even if you've had a bad product, you still have a product. And I think that means a lot to a lot of people in the state of Texas, because as James mentioned, football's king. But it's sort of, if you lose your football program by your own doing, that sort of sends the message that, you're not a player. You're not big time. You're not, even if you've got no chance. I think they would keep their program regardless. And, they've done what they've done for, 30, 40, 50 years in terms of not having that college football playoff or, major conference. Southwest Conference wasn't around during the era of the P5s and the BCS and all that, but at least Houston would have a football program. So I honestly, there's no scenario that I could ever think of, and I couldn't even think of them going independent, because there's a lot that goes into being independent. And they don't have the name brand. I mean, yeah, they're Houston, but I would think if I'm outside of Houston, there's 100 things that I would think about before I think of the University of Houston. So that from that standpoint, I couldn't see that route. So keeping football would be the only thing. And the guys are right. They put in a lot of money to subsidize over the last several years, and they've got a fairly new stadium. They've got plans to add on to the indoor facility. I mean, they're thinking is that they're moving forward. I mean, that they're not showing any inkling that they're pulling back. So that's why I think that in terms of football, they believe they're on solid enough ground that thought's not even crossing anybody's mind.
All right. I think that y'all told me. Okay. So
I could be wrong.
I mean, in the case of the SEC, each school receiving 70, 80 million per year. And Houston is in whatever conference they're in, receiving 10, 15, if they're lucky. You know what I'm saying? The gap there, how are they going to remain competitive year in, year out? Are they just going to go to the college version of 5A football? Something like that.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing right now at the current payout for the SEC by school, one school's probably making more than the entire Sun Belt or more than the entire Conference USA has, I think, 14 schools. So it might be a little bit over 50 plus, but I mean, everything is just out of whack. I mean, I remember when schools were talking about 25 million payouts and 20 million or 30 million max. Now we've all of a sudden have escalated. We're doubling, and who knows, at some point maybe they're going to triple the payouts. So you're right. You hear all these jokes about, are we relegated to 5A Division 12? I mean, whatever the things are here in Texas. But I mean, it's sort of what the thinking is, that the feeling is, because you don't have any conference outside of the SEC and the Big Ten, and probably with the ACC and their new network. I mean, the Pac-12 makes good money, but look where the Big 12 is going to be now, and look where the American and everybody else. There's a huge gap between those haves and the really, really have-nots now.
Do you guys believe if we get to a 16-team super conferences that they kind of just separate themselves, and those 64 teams are, whatever you want to call it, Division X college football, and then everybody else is, Division 1B, kind of thing, or whatever. We get to that scenario. Is that coming? Is that where we're going? Is that where it's headed?
It might, just depending on looking at how big of an advantage SEC schools have in terms of revenue that they're bringing in. Eventually, if it's that big of a gap, other schools, whether it's you're going to have another super conference going to have to form just to be able to catch up with those schools from the SEC. And I could totally see that happening where, would you call it NFL light, the NFL 2.0, where you have these 64 teams that these are the ones that are actually going to matter, going to have at least a possibility to compete for college football, a playoff. But with the way, like Sam said, it could certainly be a completely different dynamic that looks completely different from, I mean, what I've seen in the past 10 years that I've like followed sports. I can't imagine how different it'll be from how you guys grew up with.
James?
I mean, I think for this, like if there was, a 1 and 1B, Houston's athletic department really has to consider, do they want to try to squeeze into one of those 64 teams but be the bottom tier and not super competitive, or be competitive but in the, second tier division? I think that's something they have to consider, and I don't know the answer to that, but I think it is a possibility if like Andy said, the gap gets so wide with all the pay revenue and just the difference is insurmountable for some of these teams not in those power super conferences or whatever you want to call them, to be able to be competitive with any other.
Joseph, what if U of H, to take from Tillman, what if they are never part of a power conference?
Then life will go on just like it has now. I mean, I don't see what they do. I mean, what you don't go down to 1AA FCS, and really, even though no one says it, I think we're already there, Kris. I mean, that's what the Power Five was. I mean, there's the money gap. There's until now, there's been the college football playoff and BCS gap. There has been every move possibly made to push the non-Power Five schools out of any shot. And we're talking undefeated teams that should have been in, whether it was Central Florida that 1 year or Cincinnati or even Houston until they lost to UConn in that 2015 season. So, it may not be official or, on paper or whatever, but I mean, I think we're there already. You just, you have those 64 or whatever it is right now, and that's it. But as far as Houston, if it never happens, sort of the story, unfortunately, it's the story of their life. You look at how the Southwest Conference played out, and for the longest time when they were independent, you saw how tough it was when they got into the Southwest Conference, and then they won those first few years big time, and nobody liked them a lot more after that. So, I mean, they sort of had an uphill battle the entire time that they were in the Southwest Conference of how they were perceived, and then you look at them getting left out, and then you see how things shook out with the no expansion in 2016. That's just unfortunately been their story. And the way things are going, as much as they want to be in one, I don't know if they're ever going to get that invitation. And if they don't, they're just going to have to move on. But we could be 100 years old, Kris, or long gone, and our kids, sports writers or whatever, and they might still be talking about this in 50 more years. Andy might be a grandpa by then and talking about Houston still not being in a Power Five. I mean, we don't know. Or we could wake up in a year or two and we find out where we got a road trip to Eugene, Oregon, or to Tempe, Arizona, or somewhere because they're in the Pac-12. So strange things are going on, but I see it going where things are getting a lot tighter, and it's a lot tougher now to get those Power Five teams that they've long had.
Going to wrap it up with Joseph and James. One final question for both of you. Will both of you participate in next week's virtual AAC Football Media Day?
Well, it's longer than a week away, but I know what you mean.
What is it? Well,
it's like August. I think it's August the 3rd and 4th.
Yeah,
yeah,
3rd and 4th.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. It's not the same as in person. I had been told they were going to try to incorporate the lobster part of it, where like Red Lobster might have gotten involved and done something with the media, but Red Lobster wouldn't have been the same as that fresh lobster we're used to. So if you never had the lobster, James or Andy or Kris, you missed out. So now it'll just be plain barbecue. But yeah, I will be on the call. Be interested. Thought they should have done it in person though.
Thank you. I think we all agree on that. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, in person, just the whole experience we'll all agree on, is just much better. But yes, like Joseph, I plan on being on the call for that. And because I mean, there's so much to discuss, and especially with the latest news that we've talked about for the past hour or whatever. And then just focusing especially on Houston's season, this upcoming season, just because of how important it is for Dana to win and just what it means for the future of the program. So yeah.
Kris, Kris, that on the American, how they do it, Oresco kicks it off with like a state of the conference. I fully expect him to present a unified stand of where they are, but I also expect him, unlike in the past, I think he'll probably go a little bit more where he'll say, we are going to try to do this, or we are seriously looking at this. To me, that would send a message, because right now they are in the spotlight. They have a chance to do some things, and I don't think it would help them to sort of play it coy and stuff. I think you say we plan on being a player in this, and we plan on shaking up, the what's left of the realignment to our favor.
Great point, Joseph. And as you close it out with you, how can folks find you in social media?
Well, for the next week, I'm on vacation, so they won't. But for the rest of the time, just Joseph_Duarte.
James, how about you, man?
Yeah, Twitter, JDM2186. That's where you can find me. And then obviously on the Daily Cougar online, that's where all my work is.
And if Kris Duarte signs a massive deal, we're definitely family, and I won't be on next week. So
I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
JD, thank you, man, for joining us. We appreciate it. And
Anytime,
we will do
boss.
it again, man. Take care.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
You
guys.
too, James. Take care, man.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if the Wi-Fi man is. How about now, man? Because you were buffering. I saw you trying to get in and out for a while.
Man, listen. I feel like, and you as a Detroit Piston fan can appreciate this, I feel like Jordan in the 85 All-Star game, man. You froze me out for Houston sports. That's okay. I understand.
I froze you out. I brought you in. We didn't see you. It was a black screen when I went to you. And then I was like, I kept seeing you, the Wi-Fi buffer in and out. I'm like, he's connecting, then he's going out. I want to go to him, and he goes out. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? So I was like, well, man. But I think you need to check the people who gave you an upgrade, man, because I think they kind of gave you the business. So
it's you know what? We'll talk offline. But I don't know. We'll talk offline.
Okay, because it was weird because I saw it. Because one time I thought you were gonna go strictly audio. I was like, okay, well let's do audio like Tamer did last Sunday. But
yeah.
Anyway, my man.
Yes, sir.
SEC potential future payouts, almost 70 to 80 million per school.
Mm-hmm.
Could the Big Ten get to that status? I think they can. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely they can. Absolutely they can. I mean, and you asked me earlier, Cincinnati is not a AAU school, but pretty much every other school in the Big Ten currently is. But yeah, 70, 80 million, they can get there without question. I mean, Ohio State, team up north, Nebraska. It's what Joseph, maybe a bad product, but it's a product. So yeah, they can get there.
And see, Houston's not going to get there. Andy, no matter what conference, whatever becomes of the American, or whatever becomes of the Big 12 3.0 or whatever, the money will not be there to get to that level. They'll be lucky to get 15, maybe 20 million per first member school. Man, that's just, that's a huge gap, man. That's a huge gap. I guess not.
Yeah.
It hasn't turned off fans yet. But at some point, could fans be turned off if their schools they see that we can't compete with these? We can't compete with $80 million football money.
Can I put that 15 million in perspective? Not to
go ahead.
Just to be transparent. $15 million is the gate for one Ohio State home football game.
Wow.
See,
Wow.
Say that again. Say that again.
$15 million is the gate from one home Ohio State football game.
And Happy Valley seats 100 plus thousand, right, Will? Penn State, 100 plus thousand.
109, 110, 112, yeah, something like that.
So you got to imagine their revenue per game, home game is similar. I mean,
TDCU houses like 28K, 25K. They're around there,
and struggles to fill that.
Yeah, they haven't filled it the past few seasons.
Man, see that?
I mean, that's more than NRG Stadium. NRG Stadium only seats like 70.
Yeah. And see, that's one thing I could say about the perception outside looking in. U of H's football support is just not there. It pales in comparison to most of the Big 10 schools, most of the Big 12 schools. It is just not there. Houston is a pro town, and even that, I mean, iffy.
If they're not winning, there's no support.
So,
look at how Minute Maid Park was when the Astros were dreadful.
Yeah,
it was empty. Nothing but green seats.
The only pro team that, and we're going to see a test of that.
I don't know about that.
I was going to say
they haven't. They're trying to sell season tickets. Like the giant waitlist they had. Apparently, everybody got off it.
So yeah, this is a fair weather town, and we have a lot of outsiders who move to Houston for jobs and live here. So they're fans of other teams, other cities. So they're not fans of Houston area teams. So, I understand that a little bit, but overall, the Pac-12 just seemingly refusing to even consider.
Judging from that gap that we've discussed with the SEC and schools like that, I think the Pac-12, when you base it off that, they're going to have to do something drastic, especially with those West Coast teams. I mean, you look at UCLA, Oregon, USC. I mean, those schools, I wouldn't feel like they'd be content with having to be in with that big of a gap. And if you mentioned Houston, they'll probably never be able to reach 80 million in revenue. Based off that, I think they should do everything possible to somehow get attached to the Pac-12, or I don't know. But I agree. I think they're in an uphill battle to have to figure out if they ever get into a Power 5 school.
See, Pac-12, and Will says he can't hear us. We hear you, so I don't know what's.
Yeah, now he muted.
That's weird.
You might have to leave and get back.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. We hear you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
He's gonna have to pull the YouTube.
Yeah, we'll
go to the YouTube.
See if we can click it again. But yeah, I want to get his perspective on this. But that's why I don't understand why the Pac-12 does not want to come to expand to Texas, expand to Oklahoma, expand. You need the TV market. You need the eyeballs for your conference. How about now, Will?
I can hear you.
Okay. We were just talking about it. That's why we don't understand why the Pac-12 has been so adamant about not going east to come to Texas, to come to Oklahoma, the states, to add those member schools to improve your market share.
Mm-hmm. I think that was a Larry Scott piece, the former commissioner. They have a new commissioner.
Right.
His name escapes me right now. So maybe that's something that's on
Kleefkoff. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe that's something on the table now, moving forward. But Larry Scott, perhaps that's something he wasn't, willing to move forward. Maybe his member schools weren't looking to move forward with that. I don't know, but that's something to look out for going forward.
Because the numbers, Big Ten numbers, are going to increase. SEC, they're going to increase.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
If the ACC, and seeing this last 2 days, adds West Virginia, changes membership, they can go back to ESPN to renegotiate that ridiculously long 20-year contract they signed back in 2016 which was just stupid. You know, in today's technology, why would you sign a 20-year deal of anything?
Right.
I don't care how much money is involved. 20 years is just way too long with technology today. But if they do change membership, they can go back to the table and renegotiate that. The Pac-12 could be left on the lurch. Big Ten negotiations is before Pac-12. SEC before Pac-12 comes up. If the ACC adds membership, will be before the Pac-12. So they need to do something. I think, from a logic standpoint, do something to change that. They're waiting for the company line is we're going to wait for 2024, go to the open market, and wait for these bids to come in from other networks and stuff. Well, if the money's being spent elsewhere, there's not going to be much money for you to get.
Yeah, even the American was able to get that deal with ESPN.
And even that 12-year deal I thought was too long. You know, the number sounded good because it's $1 billion over 12 years. Okay, that's great. The SEC, ESPN's deal with the SEC is 300. What is it, Will? What is?
I think was it 300
billion?
Look at it.
I mean,
Yeah.
what was it? This is something ridiculous.
Something like that.
Just awesome number.
Yeah.
So I think ESPN's going to be a player. ESPN's a player in this. They're wrapping up the SEC.
They control college.
They're controlling college playoff. So if ESPN says, okay, Big 12, AAC, whatever you want to call it, we all need to merge the best. How about this? What if ESPN says, Michael Resco, Bob Bowlesby, we want these are the best teams we believe for the content. And this gives a list. And the list includes Houston, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, whatever. 12 schools. ESPN says, we want these 12. And we'll give you a bump in pay. Will it be between what the American gets and what the Big 12 was getting? So somewhere in the middle. Could that happen? Could ESPN we're running everything now. These are the schools we want to be in this new conference. Take it or leave it.
Oh yeah, without question it can. That SEC deal's 10 years, $3 billion.
$3 billion. So average $300 million a year. $300 million per.
Yep.
Wow, $3 billion. 10 years, $3 billion. The Americans' deal was 12 years, $1 billion. We thought that was great because it was better than what they had gotten. But SEC said yes. And that's going to change. That's going to go up with Texas and Oklahoma joining this. But we're going to wrap it up. Man, we're going on 2 hours of doing this. This is. I like the flexibility of what we could do with folks talking sports. But Joseph Duarte brought up a great point. The American Athletic Conference Media Days, first day is August 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
I think Commissioner Resco, in his State of the Conference address to the media, will be a great time for him to say, we're going to be proactive. We're going to be aggressive in what we're doing for membership expansion. I think, personally, that'd be a great time for him to say, and we've extended invitations to Boise State, BYU, Oklahoma State, whatever team, whatever.
Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Someone.
Just put it out there. You this week, he's got connections throughout TV, the industry. I think, what is that? August 3rd would be
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Will be a great time for him to make part of his State of the Conference speech and put out there for everybody to hear. Y'all got enough time to just talk about Team USA losing to France?
Let's go.
All right. Did y'all watch the game?
I did not. I didn't realize.
Okay,
what time was it? It was 3 a.m.
8 a.m. Oh, no. It was
Eastern.
7 o'clock Central Time. So
Oh,
I watched it
bad.
because of Tamer. It's on Peacock Premium, Will, so it ain't free.
See, that's why I missed it. I don't have the premium. I have the free.
So if you're an Xfinity customer or another cable company, you get it part of your package. But I don't have that, so I spent the money, the $5 plus tax, $5.40 to get it. They played well in the first half. Third quarter was just awful. Let me just pull up the numbers. It was awful. Let's see. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this was with Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and Devin Booker playing, correct?
Right. Middleton didn't play a lot. Book played some. He struggled. Team USA led 45-37 at halftime. Kevin Durant played 7 minutes in the first half because he was in foul trouble. 3 fouls in 7 minutes. And the irony is, international ball is supposed to be physical, more physical. Let's get away with more hand checking, things like that. These refs, I don't know where they came from, but they call it tight game. Because KD his fouls were, they were touch fouls. But US led by 8 at halftime, 45-37. They shot 17-37 from the floor in the first half. 6 for 16 from 3 in the first half. France, 15 for 32 from the floor, 1 for 11 from 3 in the first half. Then the third quarter happened. Team USA went 4 for 15, 1 for 5 from 3. France went 9 for 16 from the floor and 5 for 8 from 3. Fourth quarter. So US are down 62-56 going into the fourth quarter. Drew Holiday went off. France, I think, scored 1 point the first 5 minutes or so of the fourth quarter. Drew Holiday scored 12 of Team USA's first 13 points. They looked good. Drew was saving them. KD had his fourth foul. Drew still saving them. U.S. led 74-67 with 3:41 left in the ballgame. U.S. scored 2 points. Did not make a basket. Those 2 points were free throws when I think Dame was fouled on 3-point attempt. And that was in the final minute or so of the ballgame. Issue. U.S. they struggled. I think KD was 4 for 12 from the floor. Book was 1 for 6. Dame 3 for 10. Tatum 3 for 9. Hey, that's your 4 legit offensive weapons. All of them struggle to make shots. But with the 7-point lead, Team France, baseline out of bounds play. Nick Batum cut to the middle of the free throw line and then ran to the corner. Bam Adebayo made contact with Nick in the free throw lane and then left Nick alone as Nick went to the corner. Wide open for a 3-pointer. Bucket. USA goes down, doesn't score. France comes down. Another baseline out of bounds play. Run the same play. This time, it's Evan Fournier. Ends up in the corner. Bam doesn't go with him. Fournier. Bucket. So just like that, the same play, France scored 5 points. It was a long 2. Fournier scored a long 2. Almost was a 3. Fournier scored 28 points in the ballgame. Drew was not on him enough. Evan ate up everybody else but Drew. U.S. again struggles to score. Their offense looked like if the three of us were playing together. Team USA, they settled. They didn't penetrate. They didn't break down the defense. They just hung around the perimeter, just hoping that they made long shots. It was just awful. They were down 2. Instead of going for 2 to tie the game, they decided to jack up 3s. Clang, 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 clang. Timeout. Final seconds. I think 17 seconds left or whatever. Inbounds. Drew passes the ball to Dame. Middle of the floor. Dame falls down while trying to catch the ball. Falls down. Loses the ball. Evan Fournier picks the ball up. Dame, as he's on the floor, sticks out his, I think, right leg and trips Fournier. Refs check the monitors, intentional foul, free throws, and possession. That's it. So France ended the game on a 16-2 run in the last 3 minutes, 41 seconds. So the defense broke down because Bam, communication, whatever. Somebody should have gone to the corner to cover the player in the corner. Breakdown. And then offense, I don't know what they were running. I don't. Dame had an open three, pass it up for a turnover. I don't know. These guys did not look like they were NBA guys. I don't know what they were doing. Their offense just broke down. But I'm not surprised they lost. I think I said last week I thought France would win this game. So some folks saying, "Oh, it's a shock. It's a stunning loss. Oh, all this kind of stuff." No, it's not. How does the Team USA basketball fix what needs to be done to fix the program as a whole?
Where do I start? Oh, Andy, you got it? Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say now to add an extra ingredient. Now they have some pressure. They have to win out the next two group games. It's just to have a chance to play in medal competition. I think that's interesting what you're going to add. And Kris, one thing that you've said in terms of with the game and the balance, that the Team USA players kind of reverted to hero ball. And, that's a problem that's not even in the Olympics. You see that a lot in the NBA themselves. That's something that 2-minute offense, that's what a lot of teams end up reverting to. And I think what you're seeing is kind of I don't even know if you can call it a cultural difference with how teams overseas play. They're much more of a team style basketball, and in Team USA, it's a lot more individualized. Would say y'all.
That's true to a point.
Yeah.
But Evan Fournier went 1-on-1 and ate up folks today. So it wasn't a lot of penetration and kickouts to Fournier. He took it 1-on-1, dribble, step backs. France has NBA players too. Most of these countries have legit NBA players as well on their rosters. So I was just really surprised that Drew wasn't guarding Fournier more because he ate up almost everybody else except Drew. So it's clear. Drew Holiday, his impact the first 5 minutes of the fourth quarter were clear on defense, and he was scoring points. He scored, I think, 18 points. His effort was great, and they still lost because KD struck. KD was never in rhythm because of fouls. But, they're your main guys. Dame made his three-pointers in the first half, made nothing in the second half. Book. 1 bucket. Jason Tatum, I want to say, of his 3 baskets, 2 of them were in transition. Go ahead, Will. Fix USA basketball.
Well, I'm going to give them the flowers first, and I'm coming for next. In pool play, they have Iran and Czech Republic left. If they don't make the medal round at 2-1, it's a bigger problem.
Well, quarterfinal.
Quarterfinal. Yeah. So that's a positive. How do I fix Team USA? First of all, you got to go back to the 3-year commitment. I mean, this team came together This team came together July 6th, and in the 19 days, they've already had 6 players transition. You lost 2, Kevin Love and Bradley Beal, and then you added Holiday, Middleton, Booker, and JaVale McGee in 19 days. The days of throwing the USA jersey out there and saying we're going to win, and Pop has been saying it, and it's kind of been poo-pooed upon, but he's right. These teams have played together for weeks, months, some even years. And Dame said it best today. I saw it, and when he said it, I'm kind of like, you didn't think that? He said, these guys play different when it's for their country. In the NBA, I mean, it's just NBA. Hey, I'm winning the chip. But when you're playing with France across your chest, it's all about country. Australia, Nigeria, these guys, it's the world stage. And speaking of the world stage, cream of the crop, best of the best. I've been hearing that Kevin Durant is the best player in the world. Well, here on the world stage, where was it? Where was it? I didn't see it. But all being said, that 3-year commitment, I mean, this team's been together 19 days, and they only have 2 weeks for the Olympics. So, in 5 weeks, you're supposed to come together and win a medal? A great individual talent, but again, these teams have played together for months, years. You got to have that 3-year commitment, and hopefully Grant Hill, after taking over for Jerry Colangelo as director of USA Basketball, will hopefully implement that and bring some continuity and some cohesion to USA Basketball.
That's it right there, Will. That's a great point, man, because Draymond Green and Kevin Durant are the only 2 players on this squad that have Olympic experience.
Mm-hmm.
Other 10 guys, most of them have never played international ball. Rules are different. Style of play is different. So to expect them to play a different style of game well with new teammates in 19 days against good competition with cohesion, who's played together with chemistry, and then expect them to, I mean, some folks still are in the pipe dream of, oh, well, we're just going to win, still going to win by 10, 15, 20, 30 points. No. And this year, COVID year, I commend Book, Middleton, and Drew for sticking with it. They were in the NBA Finals Tuesday.
Yeah.
Went to Tokyo, dressed up. Middleton didn't play a lot. Book struggled to make shots, but Drew played well. I mean, that is commendable for them. And I know some folks who talk about, well, the women's basketball players do this all the time. I know that. That has nothing to do with this. You know, WNBA finals, I don't know about them going to the Olympics 2 days after playing in the finals, you know, kind of thing. Apples to apples comparisons. This keep it real there. But there has to be a commitment to the program. A 3-year commitment, you got to do it. Have a core 6, core 8, and then based on injuries, based on need, based on whatever, add 4 more. But you know you got a starting 5, a 6-man who have been together for 2-3 years. You know you can count on them. They know how to play together. They know where things, all that. You got to get to that. This let's just throw a team together, put names in a hat. No. And another great point. I'm not, I go back to it. It's just not the Olympics. It's just not that important it's not important to me anymore. Okay? So if it's not important to me anymore, I'm not surprised that it's not important to the players in America as much as it used to be. They've already got, they're their own brands. They don't need the Olympics. They don't gain that much more from playing in the Olympics for winning a medal, winning a gold medal. They don't, I don't even, who was on the 2016 team?
LeBron and Melo.
KD.
Okay.
What you said, Draymond?
Draymond was, okay. That's 4.
Was it Steph? Was Steph there? See, look, now I'm questioning.
See, now you're questioning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Steph was.
Good point.
But
Point made.
That's those guys. That's the best. If the best players, if Steph, Bron, let's put it like out of the 15 All NBA, NBA first team, second team, third team. Out of that 15, I don't know how many. Let's say 8 of them are USA. You get that 8, and hopefully that 8 is part of a core that have been together for 2-3 years. You get that core, then you add to that core a Draymond Green, a Drew Holiday. I like USA's chances. But you tossing together replacement JaVale McGee, a banged up Kevin Love, Keldon Johnson. I'm not knocking these guys, but they aren't the best that the U.S. has to offer for the Olympics. So that tells me it's not important to them. I'm not even sure how important it is to USA basketball anymore, because if it were important, you'd have a core group of players you could pick from. So win, lose, it's not. I mean, they should wax Team Iran. I think it's July 26th, 11:40 p.m. Central Time. They should thump them. They may struggle with Czech Republic a little bit. They should win that game and then advance to the quarterfinal rounds. But okay, I'm not gonna cry if they don't win a medal. Now, 20 years ago, I'll be pissed off.
Yeah, I'm gonna be. I'm keeping a buck. I will be. I'll be upset
if they don't medal or don't win a gold medal.
Both. Yes.
Why?
Come on, man. It's the expectation. It's expectation. It was a 25-game win streak snap today. I mean, so
dating back to 2004.
Yeah, I mean, come on. It's the best of the best. Yes.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I understand. And to that point, you're right, because you said all NBA. I pulled it up while you were talking. Only 2 Americans are on the first team All NBA team. It was Yanez, Steph, Luka Doncic, Joker, and Kawhi. All NBA first team.
Yeah. And before Drew, who's a point guard?
Right. I saw so many memes today. Trae Young. Where you had opportunities to call him. You had him.
This roster construction was poor.
Horrible.
The recipe, I don't believe it's changed too much. You got to have point guards. You got to have people who can defend the perimeter, pressure the ball. You got to be able to score in transition. Obviously, you need to have 3 points. You need to have 3-point snipers. Okay, I'm talking 38, 39, 40% this marksman from 3-point range. And y'all know I'm old school. If I need to get a bucket down low, I need somebody to score in the post.
Yeah.
You got to have that. Somebody who can get on the block, command a double team from the opposition. If they don't double team, it's going to be buckets all day long in the paint. If they do double team, we're going to kick it out to our 3-point shooters and light y'all up. Who's the low post threat on this team?
Nobody.
Mid-range game. Chris Middleton, maybe he's tired, and I understand. He barely played. He didn't get enough touches. I think the Bucks, and yes, it's different basketball. Yes, I know. But the mid-range game should always be in style. It should never go out of style.
Going back to roster construction, and we all agree it was horrible for this team. And with all due respect, which usually is a code means I'm about to disrespect somebody. With all due respect, when I saw Jeremy Grant was on this team, I said, "Oh, we're in trouble."
And he didn't play today at all. He was DNP, CD.
See, that's the problem. When I saw Jeremy Grant on this team, I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" No.
I was surprised he got invited.
Yes,
which goes back to the invites and goes back to the importance of the importance of this being on the team to guys. You know, yes, injuries are part of this year, and COVID is a part of it. And those are factors. But your main point of a core, a commitment, that needs to return. 3-year commitment that needs to return. Jeremy Grant, if nothing else, use him on traps, pressure defense, some aggressive defense. If nothing else, they don't do that enough. They just laid back. The defense, the chemistry is still lacking. I wasn't surprised Jeremy Grant didn't play. I mean, especially when Middleton when those guys came join the club, somebody wasn't going to play. Keldon Johnson, he's one of Pop's guys.
Right.
Barely played, but Keldon Johnson is a spark, on defense. You gotta Team USA, for its flaws, is still the deepest team we think. So if you're a deep team, that means to me, utilize your bench. That means play faster, be more aggressive, force tempo, force teams into turnovers, score in transition, get easier baskets. Because in the half court, this team is not very good.
And that was the criticism Pop. Like you said, Coach K, that was his thing. Run. With Pop, what is the offensive identity? No one knows. Because
France, Rudy Gobert, and Vincent Poirier, those two big dudes, they went Twin Towers, second half.
Yep.
USA, they couldn't defend it. They didn't play zone, I think, at all, enough to defend the big men. The defensive problems were there. The offense on the stretch was, just makes me wonder. But just get back to the commitment, a core commitment. Or, I don't understand. I mean, I said this last week, guys. This is what I don't understand. Why does Team USA have to qualify every year for competitions? Compete. We know you give them a commitment.
Yep.
The best of the best. Team USA is still the best team in the world. Why do they need to qualify for the World Championships? Why do they need to qualify for the Copa America's Cups or the Gold Cup or whatever this stuff here is? Central America and Mexico. Come on, really? Seriously, what you're forcing those guys? See, that's where we get into a problem. Well, part of their commitment,
right?
You got to have those guys playing those competitions,
right?
Why?
And some of them now, with FIBA changing the rules, are during the NBA season.
Yes. So that stuff seems to me you don't want the best to be in the Olympics,
right?
If you have these competitions during the NBA season, where's the logic in that? If you're not going to do it that way, just go back to under 23, have everybody under 23 throughout the world, and just have the youngsters play. All over the place, all over. Yeah. France. Let's see who's France's youngsters are. Let's see who Lithuanian youngsters are. Let's see Argentina, USA, the whole world, China, everybody. Under 23 Olympic competition. Let's do that.
To that point, the World Championships, under 19 World Championships last week or 2 weeks ago, USA played France and won by 2.
Yeah.
Kind of a backdrop to today's France-USA game. The under 19 France team lost by 2 to the United States.
And I forget his name, but he's a real thin young man. The best player in the U19s is from France.
Yep.
Not an American. It's from France. He's a skilled, long drink of water. Boy, we talk about Chet Holmgren being thin. Boy, this young man, woo! But boy,
yeah.
he can shoot from inside, block shots. He's the best player. No knock on Junior from La Tech.
Right.
Lofton Jr. But young fella from France, he got the NBA potential. He'll be drafted high.
Right.
But see, your points. You say all those things. That's why I won't be upset. I won't be pissed off if USA doesn't win the gold medal in men's basketball. I just won't.
Yeah.
Women's basketball, I don't know. I won't be pissed. I'll be surprised because the talent gap is still there. But Andy and Will, the USA women's soccer team lost to, was it Sweden?
Sweden. Yep.
3-0.
3-0. Yep.
That was an upset. That was a big freaking deal. I don't hear the world on fire call it for massive changes in women's soccer in the States.
Right.
You would say women's gymnastics. After day one, dominated for 10 years, right? 10 years. He's in second place.
Yep.
What's wrong with gymnastics program now? Oh, the sky is falling. Boy, folks can pick on what they want to pick on and ignore what they want to ignore. But I say all that. I'm off my soapbox again. We're going on almost 2.5 hours. Andy, how can folks catch that podcast y'all did, the combo podcast mock draft y'all put together on Saturday? How can folks check that out?
They're going to have to search up the Launch Pad podcast. It's launch as in LAUNCH pad PAD podcast. And then we actually have Pod Slamma, and obviously it's fluid, but as of right now, we're scheduled to have Ron Huey for this upcoming week. It should go up on Thursday, the same day as the NBA draft. So, like I said, it could always be fluid, but as of right now, that's the plan, and we're trying to get more guests. And like I said, we're approaching August. Football media day is about to start, so we're hoping to expand our coverage into that. So, it's the best time, and like I mentioned, Kris, there's a lot to talk about just with today, with the conference realignment and stuff like that. There was some Houston, and not to go on a tangent because we've already been on for a while, but there was some big NFL Houston news that happened today as well.
Yeah, we may have to get somebody to talk Texans, and we will get somebody to talk Texans. All right, I had a question asked, when does Jalen Green speak to the media? Jalen is scheduled to talk to media July 26th at 12:15 p.m. Central Time.
Yes.
So Jalen Green will talk to the media
Tomorrow,
12:15 Central Time. I'll be busy tomorrow, but the NBA will post the content later on Monday, and I should be able to check it out then. So, but yeah, the list of young fellas talking tomorrow. Davion Mitchell from Baylor is first, 10:30, followed by Cam Thomas, LSU at 11. Then Zaire Williams from Stanford, 11:25. Jalen Green, he's off Central Time. Jalen Green, 12:15. Keon Johnson at 1:05. James Boudnight from UConn, 1:30. Franz Wagner, 1:55. Chris Duarte, 2:20. Alperen Sengun from Turkey at 2:45, and then closing it out, Corey Kispert from Gonzaga at 3:20. And then on Tuesday, by himself, looks like, right now, 11 a.m., Jalen Suggs. It's almost draft time. Looking forward to it. As things stand right now, the Rockets are going to have, for the draft on the 29th, virtual media sessions, won't be in person. So get the interviews via Zoom with whatever they do after Jalen Green at the 2 spot. I'll have that. And then whatever they do, if they have picks, if they keep the picks for 23 and 24, have interviews and have that posted on my YouTube channel at Houston Roundball Review. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this week. Of course, if we do a show next Sunday, just let y'all know, I will be wearing my Pistons cap. Heck, if I could get me a Cade Cunningham cap by Sunday, I'm gonna do it. So, but yeah. All right, Will, wrap it up with you, man. How can folks find you on social media?
Appreciate the opportunity. Will Gibson 7 on social media platforms, Twitter, as well as Instagram. The Will Knows Facebook page, Will Knows Podcast, as well as our website, www.wtgsports.com.
All right, we're going to close it out. Wow, 2.5 hours, man. 2.5 hours, a lot of football talk, because college football makes college sports go around. You know, folks talking sports, we'll get into other sports. We'll get back to basketball. It will be the core. But with the news of the Longhorns and Sooners going to the SEC, that was big news. And it impacts U of H and a lot of teams that we cover here in town locally, and had to get Will's perspective as well from the Big Ten point of view. But trust us, basketball will still be our core. But as Andy touched on it, we will have some folks talk Texans on here in the future. May get somebody to talk baseball at the Astros, who are, I think, 5 games up on the A's in their division. So it's folks talking sports. It's not Folks Talking Basketball. So yes, it's Houston Roundball Review presents Folks Talking Sports. We're going to do a lot going forward here in the weeks and months and hopefully years go by. So I'm Kris Gardner of Houston Roundball Review, HoustonRoundballReview.com, Houston Roundball Review on YouTube and Instagram, Twitter, THEHR Review. Let me pull it up real quick as we close it out so everybody can see the Twitter handles for all of us. You see mine there, and then Andy Yanez, _5, and then Will Gibson 7 on Twitter. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this. Thank you for our guests, Sam Khan from The Athletic, Joseph Duarte from the Houston Chronicle, and James Mueller from the Daily Cougar. There's a lot. We touched on a lot. 2.5 hours. I don't know if we're going to go long like this again, but if we have reason to, we can. We're flexible to do that. Fellas, thank you very much. Oh, let's put it out there right now. Are you good for next Sunday, same time?
Yes, Sunday works.
All right. So next Sunday, 7 p.m. Central, we give a recap of the NBA draft and may have some content to post from interviews, post-draft interviews of draft picks.
There'll be a lot of content. Yeah.
So let's look forward to that. Everybody, thank you very much for everybody who tuned in today. I think this was the most views we had so far to date. Onward and upward going forward. Thank you very much for your comments. And come back to us next Sunday. It'll be August 1st, 7 p.m. Folks Talking Sports. Y'all take care.